Ulrich, an immortal man, lived in a land where winter's snows piled high and summer's warmth was a rare, fleeting visitor. Even in the warmest months, the snow refused to fully melt, a testament to the harshness of the kingdom. This particular year was one of those rare, intensely warm summers, a stark contrast to the usual biting cold. The land seemed to breathe a different, warmer air, inviting a moment of peace. In this unusual warmth, he walked with an old woman named Hilda, her voice soft as she called his name. She observed his unchanging presence, noting the strange truth that he did not age, nor did he die. Hilda, with the wisdom of her years etched on her face, gently confirmed his immortality. She then asked him, with a deep empathy, if such an endless life was not, in fact, filled with profound torment. He remained silent for a moment, the weight of his existence heavy on his shoulders, before finally acknowledging her question. Time, he explained, flowed ever onward, leaving him perpetually alone in its relentless wake. He recalled visions of long-lived beings, like the majestic elves, who despite their seeming eternity, were eventually claimed by their own ends. Even the most resilient creatures had their limit. His mind drifted further back, remembering the first of the dragons, ancient beings born long before he ever was. They too had long since faded to dust in some distant, forgotten land. His gaze was filled with a deep, weary sorrow as he confessed the truth. He had let go of countless loved ones and knew he would continue to watch more slip away, confirming that this endless parting was, of course, painful. Turning his back, perhaps to hide his sorrow, he offered a different perspective on mortality. He believed that because mortals had finite lives, their memories too would eventually fade. The present, he mused, inevitably became the past, leaving only fractured memories behind. Slowly, the sharp agony of loss would soften, eventually transforming into a quiet, wistful longing. Hilda looked at him with a tender sadness, her voice soft as she posed a heartbreaking question. Would she, too, one day become nothing more than a fading memory to him? He could only offer the most honest, painful answer. He supposed so. There was no escaping the truth of his condition, and that fact weighed heavily on them both. A soft, knowing smile touched Hilda's lips, her eyes closing in gentle resignation. She remarked that if he had promised to remember her forever, it would have been a rare and precious delight. Reaching out, Ulrich took her frail hand in his, a golden ring visible on his finger. Hilda then leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper as she revealed a final, heartfelt favor. She asked him, when her time came, to take up her title and all the responsibilities that came with it. She wanted him to rule the land, protect its people, and carry on in her stead. Hilda's eyes met his, her final, most personal plea etched into their depths. She simply asked him to keep her in his memories for as long as he possibly could. Despite her heartfelt wish, he knew the cruel reality of his existence. His memories of her, like all the others, would eventually fade into obscurity, a truth that tormented him. He envisioned the process, the shared moments slowly dimming. Once even those who had shared those memories with him were gone, their presence would vanish entirely. A day would inevitably arrive when even the faintest echo of her, the most distant reminiscence, would blur and vanish from his mind. It was a terrible, inescapable truth for an immortal. Back in the present, his hand, still adorned with the golden ring, rested on a document, a testament to the duties he had inherited. Yet, despite the endless losses, his life would continue. He knelt before a tombstone, the name carved into it likely Hilda's. An attendant, standing nearby, addressed him respectfully as Sire. The attendant, concerned for his well-being, noted the lingering cold in the air. He gently urged him to return inside, away from the biting chill, but he remained. He slowly rose, his gaze fixed on the quiet graves. He understood that he had to keep moving forward, accepting the solitary path laid before him, even if it meant more goodbyes. His foot stepped away from the grave, leaving a clear imprint in the fresh snow. He knew that even if every new encounter would eventually lead to another painful farewell, he had to keep going. Looking back at the path he was taking, he resolved that all the time he had spent, and all the time he would spend, would not be wholly filled with pain. This was only the beginning of a life lived with both sorrow and unexpected joy. Roberta, a young priestess, stood at the precipice of an unexpected destiny, her life about to intertwine with the ancient mysteries of the Osnover kingdom. Alonso, her mentor, was entrusting her with a mission, a revelation that caught her so off guard she choked on her tea. Hardly believing what she was hearing, the young woman stammered, "Me, her eyes wide with shock. Alonso reassured her, explaining Dithmarschen was a place he knew well, having once served as its head priest. He emphasized that her appointment was a personal decree from His Holiness himself, despite the humble temple. The audacity of his suggestion stunned her, a young priestess barely 2 years ordained. Alonso merely offered a knowing, gentle smile, tapping his cup with a decisive sound. He had already named her as successor, and this conversation was merely a courtesy, his expression calm and unyielding. Her mind reeled, her suspicion growing. To her, it seemed far too simple, almost suspicious, that they weren't even looking for the missing priest. Alonso, however, remained unconcerned, a faint smile playing on his lips. With a sigh, frustration filled her as she expressed her exasperation at his unyielding nature, a hand going to her head. He looked at her then, his gaze carrying a depth that hinted at the long years they had shared. She was confused by his words. "You remind me of myself," wondering what he truly meant. Their conversation continued in the quiet study, the morning light streaming through the window. He reminded her that he had taken her in when her parents abandoned her, a hand gently holding hers in the past. He had even ordained her himself, a younger Alonso walking hand in hand with the tiny Roberta. In the present, she listened, the weight of their shared history settling over her. Alonso smiled, a fond memory in his eyes as he recalled their past. She had grown up listening to his adventures, not fairy tales, as he told stories to her bedside. Now, in her travel cloak, she rode towards Dithmarschen, a land shrouded in mystery. The castle of Dithmarschen loomed in the distance, a formidable structure hinting at the challenges ahead. Her journey was promptly halted by a guard, a spear blocking her path. He questioned her presence, his stance firm and unwelcoming. Our priestess, showing the emblem of Ganymede, introduced herself as a servant of the goddess, come to pay respects. The guard, a towering man, asked if she was indeed a priest of Ganymede, his imposing presence evident. She felt small next to him, musing that perhaps the blood of giants ran in his veins. The young woman confirmed her name and stated she was sent by Father Alonso, head of the Nua Grand Temple. The guard's demeanor instantly softened, a chibi thought bubble appearing above his head as he processed the name. A wide, delighted smile spread across his face as he exclaimed what marvelous news this was. He introduced himself as Bernhard Meyer, inviting her to call him Bern, and took her hand in a gesture of respect. Bern remarked on how swiftly time passed, recalling that Father Alonso had been scarcely past 30 during his own time here. Now, the hour had come for his successor to take the helm, a new chapter beginning for Dithmarschen. Her contemplative face showed her mind working, already piecing together the strange circumstances. A close-up of her eye conveyed her growing suspicion, the hint of unease in her gaze. The Lord of Dithmarschen, Bern explained, had succeeded a figure named Hilda and held his position for a staggering 300 years. Our priestess, bewildered, asked that there was another priest there, knowing only an ordained priest could perform such a rite. Bern shook his head, stating plainly, "No," his expression unchanging. Her eyes widened in horror, the full impact of the revelation hitting her. "Pardon?" she exclaimed. Bern looked at her, his expression still calm, while her shock remained palpable. She couldn't believe it. The Lord himself was presiding over the sacrament, despite being an unordained man. The other soldiers stood by, seemingly unfazed by the extraordinary situation. The young priestess's frustration grew as she observed the villagers' lukewarm reaction. Did they not understand the peril? "Blast!" she cried, urging her horse forward, the urgency of the moment driving her. Her mount spurred, she searched for the Lord amidst the gathering crowd, her eyes scanning for any sign. As she dismounted in haste, her boots hitting the ground with a thud, she heard the distinct cry of a baby. The sound, small and vulnerable, pulled her forward, a tiny life at stake. Through the throng, she frantically asked for the Lord's location, her gaze sweeping over the faces. Amidst the sea of people, the priestess looked around, confused, unable to immediately locate the figure she sought. A villager pointed, guiding her eyes toward the center of the commotion. She saw him then, a tall figure holding an infant, the ritual clearly underway. And then, she witnessed it plainly. Mana seeped from the man's forehead, settling fully within the child, her eyes wide with disbelief. The baby's face glowed with a soft red light, a clear sign the sacrament was successfully imbued. The infant's eyes, now open and shining with an ethereal glow, confirmed the magic had taken hold. The Lord held the baby, looking at it with a tender, gentle smile, his focus entirely on the child. Our priestess's mind reeled, her expression a mix of shock and confusion. How could this be? The Lord's hand gently touched the baby's cheek, a gesture of quiet completion. He then handed the infant back to its mother, his duty fulfilled. With a determined gaze, the young woman approached him, the weight of her realization heavy in the air. Her eyes, wide and searching, conveyed the profound questions swirling within her. As he turned to face her, his youthful appearance a stark contrast to the centuries he was said to have lived, the young priestess knew her journey had only just begun. He stood in the last light of a dying sun, and she couldn't look away. Lord Ulrich had a face too young for the weight behind his eyes, calm the way only very old things are calm, patient, the way only dangerous men allow themselves to be. She studied him the way a hunter reads strange tracks, careful, uneasy. He was far too tall to be ordinary, far too still to be harmless. Something about him did not sit right with what she knew of the world. That eye held the question her mouth couldn't form. A man his age should carry the marks of decades on his face. He carried none. It should have been impossible to stay this young, and yet here he stood. She said nothing, but her face said everything. The silence between them crackled, not with fear exactly, but with the sharp awareness that she was standing next to something she did not yet understand. He gestured her toward the door with a quiet ease that left no room for refusal. An old man watched from the edge of the dark. This was how Ulrich operated, unhurried, in full control, extending welcome like a leash. Inside the tent, warmth and unease arrived together. Tea was poured without being asked for, a small act of command dressed up as hospitality. She sat rigid, uncertain whether she was a guest or a guest being studied. He held out the cup with the ease of a man who had done this 10,000 times before. No performance, no charm, just the quiet offer of someone who already knew she would take it. That certainty was its own kind of pressure. She asked the question all newcomers ask when they want to establish rank before trust. It was a test, and the moment it left her mouth, she already sensed he would not answer it the way she expected. He already knew exactly who she was. Her mentor had sent word ahead, placing her here as the next head priest. She had arrived thinking she was making a choice. She was beginning to understand the choice had been made for her. His face gave nothing away, just that faint, unhurried look of a man absorbing information he already had. A tiny, chibi version of her hovered above his head, sipping tea, oblivious. He, on the other hand, was very much aware. She took a sip, and the warmth hit before the taste did. Her eyes went wide. Whatever she had braced for, it wasn't this, something rich and strange and wholly unlike anything she had tasted before. This land ran by different rules. The tea ambushed her completely. She sputtered, caught off guard, while he drank from his own cup without so much as a blink. The contrast said everything. She was still learning the shape of this place, and he had long since stopped being surprised by it. This land grew under the shadow of the demon realm, and nothing here was quite what it appeared back home. Same roots, same names, different nature. The border between familiar and wrong was thinner here than anywhere she had ever been. She had been warned the weather here was bitter and barren. But the cup in her hands was warm, and outside was greener than the reports had promised. Something had changed this land recently, and she was only now feeling the edge of that change. The climate had only begun to soften a few years back, a small, cheerful fact delivered by a man who looked like he'd witnessed several centuries of weather. The contrast between the lightness of the news and the weight behind his eyes was hard to ignore. The warmth kept rising regardless of what season the calendar claimed. He said it with the quiet authority of someone who had watched the cold take hold long ago and had simply waited for it to let go, which it finally had. Ice Age. The word landed strangely. She had studied history, but history felt different when the man recounting it looked like he might have lived through the part being discussed. Her cup hovered, forgotten, halfway to her lips. Of course he knew about the Ice Age. He said it the way someone says, of course, when the answer is simply true. No boast, no performance. Just a man who had been there, confirming what the books only guessed at. Something vast and old cracked open in the silence between them. The world they had been calmly discussing, its empires, its cold spells, its long turns, suddenly felt like it had teeth. The air shifted weight. 2 fingers. 2 fallen empires. A third now standing. He laid out centuries of collapse like a man counting change. The gesture so casual it made the scale of it worse. He had watched 2 worlds end and was still here to count them. The Little Ice Age had come when the Second Empire fell. He said it plainly, snow drifting behind him like memory. He also noted it was smaller than the ancient one, a distinction only someone who had seen both could make without doubt. She sat with the weight of that, quiet, cup in hand, working it through. A man who could tell a Little Ice Age from a true one by feel. The math of his years was starting to become impossible to ignore. Something unlocked behind her eyes. The full shape of what she was sitting with finally arrived, not as a fact to be filed, but as a truth that rearranged everything else around it. She had come here with one set of questions. She was leaving with different ones. He sat still in the firelit dark, hands folded, expression unreadable. A man who had outlived 2 empires had no reason to feel silence. He simply waited, not because he was patient, but because time had stopped meaning what it meant to everyone else. She lay awake with the question she couldn't say out loud, the one her whole body had been asking since she arrived. Who was this man, really? He named it for her gently, like turning a mirror toward a face that already knew but hadn't looked yet. She said nothing. Her profile was sharp and guarded, the way a person looks when they're choosing to keep something back. Not denial, just the practiced stillness of someone who had learned to think before she spoke, especially around men like this. 300 years. The rumor had followed him like a shadow. Half-elf, they said, which was how people explained what they couldn't fit into a human frame. She had been sent here already carrying that story. Now she was laughing because it didn't match what she saw. He spoke from the dark like a man who had corrected this particular rumor many times before and had long since stopped being annoyed by it. There was almost something tired in the stillness, not defensive, just worn smooth by repetition. Not a half-blood, purely human. He said it twice, as if once was never enough, as if the claim itself required the weight of repetition to land. 2 simple words that made everything stranger, not simpler. A human who ages with impossible slowness. She stared, jaw tight, trying to make the pieces fit. A tiny chibi version of him laughed beside her, unbothered. The real him just waited, calm as stone, for the confusion to settle into something she could carry. He set down his cup without ceremony and noted he had no interest in forcing belief. That ring on his finger caught the light for just a moment, a small gold seal, worn long, a detail she filed away without quite knowing why. He offered her a small, sharp smile and told her it was never wise to overthink things. Not a dismissal, more like advice from someone who had spent centuries learning that the mind that chases every thread eventually unravels itself. Something shifted in her face. The hard edge softened just slightly, caught off guard by the honesty of that. She had come in armored, and here was a man who wasn't trying to breach her defenses. He was simply being too strange to resist. The door cracked open, and 2 small faces peered through, wide-eyed, bundled up, uncertain whether they were allowed to be there. The interruption was soft and human and entirely at odds with the weight of the conversation that had just ended. She turned to find him already stepping toward the door, not startled, just responsive, the way a man moves when he is used to being needed. She looked up at the broad line of his back and felt, for the first time, genuinely small in his presence. He told her she could take charge of the ceremony from now on. It wasn't praised as a request. She was still on the floor, cups scattered, processing, and he was already moving forward, having decided she was ready before she had decided it herself. He said her name, Roberta, and the warmth in it was not performed. It was the warmth of someone who had made a choice about her and was telling her so with the simplest means available. A name, said right, can be its own kind of promise. They stood close enough that the world narrowed to just the space between them. No words here, only the particular silence of 2 people realizing, at the same time, that something has quietly shifted between them without either of them choosing to name it. This was what it meant to be mortal. The raw, bone-deep need to hold what was yours and never let go. 2 parents bent over a newborn, fierce with love, oblivious to everything outside that small warm circle. Life reduced to its most honest form. The village gathered around him as the old woman reached for his hands. He accepted the touch without pride and without distance, just a quiet man standing at the center of people who needed him to be there. He had learned, long ago, how to bear that weight. The village elder explained the greeting ritual, that to receive this mark meant a person had lasted long enough in this harsh land to earn it. Roberta watched from the edge, arms crossed, still tallying up the things here that made no ordinary sense. She exhaled and let herself admit it. There was no end to the odd things piling up in this place. The rite barely functioned. The Lord defied all known timelines, and still the people here lived with quiet faith. She was beginning to see why her mentor sent her here. The old priest appeared beside her with a cup in a calm that felt almost rehearsed. She asked what he meant. He was already one step ahead, offering something before she had fully formed the question, which was its own kind of answer. She accepted the cup with something warming in her face. Less guard, more openness. Whatever had tightened in her since she arrived was starting to loosen, one small human moment at a time. The wine helped. The company helped more. Better than freezing to death, she said, and drank. The old priest smiled. It was the kind of toast that comes from real experience, said by someone who had, at some point, genuinely weighed the alternative and chosen the warmth. Remarkable, wasn't it? He said it softly, eyes half closed, holding the bottle like it still meant something to him. She glowed with the wine, cheeks flushed, and for the first time all chapter she looked like she might actually be at ease here. The wine had a history. Lord Ulrich had given it to him when he was a child, a gift so particular, so out of proportion to the moment, that it had been kept and carried and guarded for a lifetime. Some gifts asked to be returned. It had been a hunt gone wrong, deep in the forest, a monster drawn by the noise of them, and two people in danger where one hunter stood. The old priest had been young then, young and alone and outnumbered by the cold and the dark and the teeth. He ran. That was the whole miracle of it. Not skill, not strength, just the animal refusal to stop moving. Both survivors on the sled, the beast behind them, nothing ahead but distance and the hope that distance would be enough. Ulrich had been there, waiting in the white. He named what the old man had done courage, and gave him the bottle, a lord kneeling in the snow before a frightened boy who had simply refused to leave anyone behind. The boy had held the bottle like it contained something he didn't deserve. That lopsided grin, those wide eyes. He hadn't known what to do with being seen that way. Being told your fear was, in fact, brave. And so, near the end of his life, he had returned it. Ulrich took the bottle with the same quiet gravity he gave everything. No ceremony, no words that did more than the gesture itself. Some debts are paid not in coin but in trust. The old priest's face held something harder than age, a loyalty built over decades, carved into every line. He had watched this man from boyhood. Whatever doubts the world carried about Ulrich, this man had none. That was its own kind of testimony. The bottle rested in his hands like something sacred, not because of what it held, but because of all the years it had traveled to get back here, across a life, across a winter that nearly ended it, back to the hands that first gave it. She listened, and the armor she had worn all evening was gone. The old priest knew she found Ulrich strange. Of course she did. He wasn't asking her to stop. He was just telling her what he knew, which was not the rumor but the man. He gazed toward the dark as he spoke, the way old men do when the story they're telling is still alive inside them. He had known Ulrich long enough to have watched him return the wine and not blink. That said something nothing else could. Under a full moon, he held a newborn up as the family watched. His face carried something close to wonder, not joy exactly, but the particular gravity of a man who had seen too much life begin and end to take any of it lightly. Two small figures sat outside under open sky, sharing what was left of the wine. The ceremony was done, the night was quiet, and for a moment the world asked nothing of either of them. Sometimes that is the rarest gift a place can offer. Her hands turned the cup slowly, staring into the red. Her thoughts were too full and too tangled to sort. Not unhappy, just overloaded. There were too many versions of him to hold at once, and she was still trying to find the one that was real. She exhaled and admitted her mind was full. It wasn't a complaint, it was surrender, the kind that comes when a person stops fighting the strangeness and starts letting it settle. The old priest sat beside her, quiet, understanding exactly what she meant. He stood apart from the celebration, watching his people move and laugh and hold each other under a sky full of stars. Not cold, not separate, just the particular solitude of a man who had learned to love from a distance because all the ones he loved up close were gone. From below, the scene flipped, and for a beat, it looked like the stars were where the ground should be and the people were dancing in the sky. A world seen upside down can look, briefly, like it makes more sense that way. Roberta sat with it all. The wine, the words, the weight of everything she'd learned since she arrived. Her face was still, but not closed. Something had changed in her since that first suspicious glare. She had not yet decided what to do with that change. He stood alone by the fire as the last of the celebration wound down around him. The flames caught the edge of his face and left the rest in shadow. A lord between eras, too human to be a myth, too old to be anything else. The old priest found him inside, and the two men regarded each other with the ease of people who have long since run out of things to prove. What came next was said with honesty, which was the only language Ulrich had ever trusted between them. She stood in the thin slice of light coming through the door, not quite inside and not quite out. The half-shadow suited her. She was still deciding which side of certainty to step onto. The knight was not finished asking things of her. The child beside him was of the age when men should have grandchildren of their own, and yet he had not grown. The old priest spoke plainly, with the honesty of someone who had earned the right to say what others only whispered. He was of an age to tell the truth. That eye burned like something that had never belonged in a human face. Amber and ancient and wholly awake, the one honest thing in a man who had spent 3 centuries keeping everything else carefully still. Here, finally, was what lived beneath the calm. She held him in the rain and dark, desperate and fierce in the way of people who have only just understood what they stand to lose. He was limp, pale, soaked through, pulled back from somewhere she could not follow him. This was the curse. This was what returned from death. Our priestess, a diligent woman, found herself adjusting to a new and somewhat chaotic parish, having arrived just over a week ago. Her first priority was to restore order to the church, which had fallen into disarray since her predecessor's disappearance, so she quickly selected new acolytes. However, a recent sacrament had left her troubled, as the proper etiquette had been completely disregarded, which bothered her greatly. She knew they needed to discuss the proper way to conduct a sacrament, emphasizing the importance of incense and anointing oil. Her superior, the lord of the manor, merely asked why, clearly not understanding her concern for the sacred rites. She explained that it was the proper way to honor Lord Hestio, the adopted son of goddess Ganymede. He was a mortal taken into the care of the goddess herself, a unique figure in their lore. He then began to recount the legend of Hestio, explaining how Hestio, dwelling among the gods, once spied humans shivering on the cold earth. Taking pity, he descended and offered them fire, a gesture that changed their world. From that hour forth, humans began to follow him, regarding him as both father and god, their devotion absolute. Whenever they held a ritual, they would kindle a fire to honor him, creating smoke from the extinguished flame. Our Lord, however, corrected her, saying that calling upon Hestio would be more precise than simply honoring him. He further explained that the reason they lit and then extinguished the fire was to summon Hestio himself. For when the flame died, Hestio would descend and relight it every time, sparing them the trouble of starting anew. Yet, the humans misunderstood this act, believing he appeared whenever the fire was put out, a fundamental misinterpretation. Our priestess was taken aback by his uncanny knowledge of these details, asking if he had met Lord Hestio himself. She realized his explanation implied that all their etiquette stemmed from a fundamental misconception. The gods, he explained, never actually instructed them in such matters, making the ritual somewhat hollow. So, how could this flawed understanding truly aid the sacraments? She wondered at the depth of his skepticism. He reminded her that he was a priest, implying he knew what he was talking about, a subtle challenge to her faith. She assured him she remembered that well enough, but then he calmly extinguished the candle he held. He then claimed he had told Father Alonso precisely the same thing, a revelation that stunned her. Father Alonso had never mentioned anything of the sort, which cast a shadow of doubt over everything she knew. She supposed it was unavoidable, living in the land of the one-eyed, a place known for its peculiar ways. She admitted in her letter that she wasn't particularly devout, but even she followed customs without questioning the rituals. The thought of his casual dismissal of sacred rites made her furious, a burning indignation within her. Her eyes narrowed, wondering how he hadn't been reported for heresy to this very day. Even when she tried to investigate him a bit more, she found nothing concrete, as if he simply vanished into thin air. She also noted that he was a most remarkable man, with legends of him felling giants and visiting dragon nests. She found herself struggling to describe him, concluding that he was a man of great refinement. And so, the people here treated him as a god, which ironically made her feel like an outsider, the weird one in their midst. She wondered if she could truly adapt to this strange place over the next 10 years, a daunting prospect. Another discomfort was her lodging. She was staying in the Lord's manor because the temple quarters were in such poor condition. She supposed he let her stay out of consideration, but to her, it was merely an uncomfortable cohabitation with a suspicious lord. her thoughts were interrupted by a sound, making her wonder if the remote manor actually received visitors in such rugged terrain. She observed two figures, an old man and a younger one, walking towards the Lord's office. The Lord, sitting at his desk, acknowledged their presence, knowing they were seeking him. The old man, Rashid, came from the kingdom of Ararik, having heard tales of the Lord's long life. 300 years, as Rashid understood it, was an impressive feat. The Lord corrected him, stating it was bordering on immortality, and asked if that was what Rashid came to find out. Rashid's reason for seeking him was something else though, something about his son's curse. Our priestess reacted with surprise, wondering what this curse could possibly be. The Lord asked Rashid his age, to which Rashid replied 67, having fathered his son at 21. He spoke with honesty, explaining that his son was now of an age where he should be fully grown with children of his own. Yet, his son remained a child, locked in a perpetual state of youth, a heartbreaking reality for a father. Everything had changed the day his son returned from death, a moment that shattered their lives. The Lord clarified, asking if the child had truly died and come back to life, the implications of such an event vast. Rashid confirmed it, calling it an unforeseen accident, a tragedy beyond their comprehension. His son had drowned in a stream, a simple accident that led to an unimaginable consequence. Rashid and his wife had confirmed his passing, even holding a funeral, mourning their lost child. But not long after, screams echoed from his grave, a sound that would haunt them forever. They hastily dug up the grave and opened the coffin, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Inside, they found the child crying, a horrifying sight that forever changed their understanding of life and death. From that day forward, the child ceased to grow, and his mind regressed to that of an infant. He remembered nothing save that Rashid was his father, a fragile connection to his past. Rashid explained that they bury the dead entirely intact so they may travel to the afterlife connected to the earth, but his son could not. He believed his son was cursed by the gods, unable to pass on, and return to this world in this state. The old man claimed it was because his son had insulted the gods when he was 8, a desperate attempt to find meaning in his suffering. The Lord, however, told Rashid to cease his lies, his voice firm and unwavering. He scoffed at Rashid's claim of traveling from Ararik, a distant country in the east, just to see him. The Lord believed few outside Osnover knew of him, suggesting Rashid had merely wandered, heard rumors, and came. Rashid, shocked by the Lord's insight, conceded that sicknesses and curses could be healed by priests, or if not, then by mages and alchemists, a common understanding of their world. But if none of them could fix it, then it wasn't a curse at all, the Lord asserted, stripping away Rashid's narrative. Our priestess, watching the exchange, urged the Lord to tell the truth, sensing a deeper secret. The Lord looked at Rashid, his gaze piercing through the old man's carefully constructed story. Rashid's eye widened, a sudden, stark realization dawning upon him. A flashback began, 30 years ago, showing a chaotic battlefield, the air thick with tension and violence. The gates of a fortress were opening, the sound echoing ominously across the field. Soldiers were ordered to push through, their faces grim with determination. Rashid, a soldier then, looked confused, asking whom they were to capture. Another soldier admitted he didn't know the details either, only the boss's command. But from what the boss said, the target was supposedly an alchemist researching immortality. Rashid's life took a dark turn 30 years ago when he was ordered to capture an alchemist. A deafening roar ripped through the air as the massive gates of the fortress slowly creaked open. Soldiers surged forward, a tide of humanity crashing against the enemy lines, desperate to push through the breach. Amidst the chaos, a superior officer on horseback called out to him, urging him onward. Rashid, caught in the fray, could only look on with a confused expression, unsure of the exact mission. Beside him, another soldier admitted he knew no more than Rashid about the strange orders. His only clue was a whispered detail from his boss about an alchemist researching immortality. Once inside, the entire complex was eerily silent, completely empty of any resistance. He scanned the deserted rooms, a growing worry settling in that their target might have already fled. The thought of the alchemist escaping was a troublesome prospect for their mission. He investigated further, noting the strange alchemical equipment left behind. A small fire still burned under a flask, revealing the alchemist's hurried departure. His eyes landed on a mysterious, glowing green liquid shimmering with an otherworldly light. As he reached for the intriguing vial, a hooded figure suddenly appeared, yelling for him to keep his filthy hands away. Rashid, startled, instinctively drew his sword, ready for a fight. The hooded figure, the alchemist himself, retaliated by blasting him with raw, blue energy. The sheer power of the attack left Rashid stunned, recognizing the strange light for what it was. It was mana, a force he had only heard whispers of, now exploding around him. The blast shattered the room, sending debris flying in every direction. Rashid was thrown violently to the ground, the impact rattling his bones. He struggled to breathe, coughing through the dust and smoke that filled the air. The alchemist, clutching his own chest, flinched from the exertion of his magic. His gaze dropped, eyes wide with horror as he watched the glowing vial slip from its stand. He scrambled, reaching out desperately to catch the falling, precious liquid. The vial shattered in his grasp, its contents spilling onto his injured hand. He cursed under his breath, lamenting the loss of his life's work. Seizing the opening, Rashid struck, his blade flashing through the air. The alchemist fell, his body impaled by Rashid's sword. Blood dripped from his hand, mixing with the spilled elixir. Rashid watched the young man collapse, a mix of grim satisfaction and confusion on his face. His hand, still gripping the sword, was now stained with the alchemist's blood. As the alchemist lay dying, fire erupted from his body, consuming him and his lab. Rashid, wounded and weary, watched the flames consume his foe, a dawning realization gripping him. The alchemist's form dissolved into the inferno, leaving nothing but ashes. It was at that point, looking at the burning remnants, that the terrible truth became clear to him. The young man he had just slain was the very alchemist they had been sent to capture, the old man from their orders. Later, discussing it with a fellow soldier, he questioned why they had been told the alchemist was old. He concluded the alchemist must have slowed his aging, making him appear young despite his true age. The man Rashid was speaking with, our boy, listened intently as Rashid shared his agonizing thoughts. Our boy calmly stated that historically, those who pursued immortality met only miserable ends. Such endeavors, he explained, invariably led to a pathetic death, just like the alchemists. He assured Rashid that his boss would soon forget his fleeting obsession with immortality. Despite those words, Rashid found himself unable to discard the remaining elixir he had salvaged. The alchemist's youthful appearance had instilled in him a strange, desperate hope. Rashid had initially planned to sell the elixir for a handsome sum, but fate had other plans. Soon after, a terrible misfortune befell his own son, who became gravely ill. Rashid, overwhelmed by grief and a desperate need, felt compelled to do anything to save his child. Tears streamed down his face as he prepared to administer the alchemist's elixir. He truly believed the powerful draught would restore his son to health. But even after giving him the elixir, his son did not immediately revive. Thinking his son had passed, Rashid reluctantly laid him in the earth, only for a horrifying event to follow. One day, chilling screams began to emanate from the shallow grave. His wife, before her own passing, had voiced her unease, saying their son seemed not entirely their son. The child, now alive, behaved like a wild animal, blood smeared around his mouth as he devoured food. Rashid tried to control him, calling out to the child he believed was his own. He reached out, attempting to soothe the feral boy. His wife watched in horror, a scream caught in her throat. Rashid struggled with his son, who thrashed and fought like a beast. The child crawled on the floor, picking up and eating fallen fruit with disturbing ferocity. The man listened, his expression grave, as Rashid described how no one could understand the strange affliction. He paused, then asked Rashid if he truly still considered this creature his child. Rashid gripped the man's hand, his voice filled with the parent's unwavering devotion. He insisted that even if the boy behaved like a beast, he still bore his son's form. The man looked at him with pity, acknowledging the depth of his delusion. Then, echoing his wife's earlier words, he calmly stated that this was not Rashid's son. Rashid looked at him, his face twisting in disbelief, demanding an explanation. the man, with a chilling resolve, drew a knife, the glint of the blade catching the light. He raised the weapon, declaring that only one path remained for this tragic situation. Rashid's wife, seeing the imminent danger, screamed and rushed forward to intervene. Unheeding, our boy calmly walked towards the feral child. He stood over the boy, raising the knife high, his face grim with purpose. With a swift, brutal motion, the man plunged the knife into the child, ending its life as Rashid watched in utter despair. This was only the beginning. The real storm hadn't hit yet. A battle raged, swift and brutal, as a young man fought for his life. His eyes held a fierce determination, locked in a deadly dance with an older, formidable foe. A sudden, sharp pain flared, and he coughed up blood, a clear sign of a surprise attack. The old man, seemingly defeated, had hidden a second blade, using it to wound him deeply. A strange apology escaped the old man's lips, as if he himself was shocked by his own actions, adding a layer of unsettling mystery to the assault. He questioned the bizarre turn of events, sensing a deeper, more sinister game at play. From the shadows, Roberta watched in horror, her heart pounding as she rushed to intervene. The old man's earlier facade crumbled, revealing a face contorted with pure malice and fury. He lunged at Roberta, a crazed look in his eyes, intent on striking her down. With a swift move, Roberta met his attack, her blade reflecting the old man's distorted image. The old man unleashed a burst of power, a desperate attempt to overwhelm her. Roberta grunted, deflecting the blow with practiced ease, her focus unwavering. The old man cried out, clutching his chest as Roberta's counterattack landed with brutal force. Yet, through it all, our boy remained strangely calm, taking a casual bite from a red apple, an unnerving display amidst the chaos. Roberta quickly turned to him, her voice laced with deep concern, asking if he was all right. Her gaze shifted between the battle and him, a flicker of confusion crossing her face as his nonchalance felt out of place. The apple core dropped from his hand, a small yet significant sound in the tense silence. Roberta, decisive, plunged her blade into the old man, ending his frenzied attack. He looked at the fallen foe, calmly stating that the old man was never truly alive, a cryptic remark that hinted at a deeper truth. The question hung in the air as the old man's body collapsed, leaving Roberta pondering his words. A chilling transformation began as his eyes glowed crimson, his teeth sharpening into fangs. The old man lay on the floor, groaning faintly, his life slowly ebbing away. To Roberta's horror, he then leaned down, sinking his fangs into the old man's neck, an act of primal savagery. He pulled away, blood staining his lips, and softly uttered Roberta's name, as if to remind her of their bond even in this monstrous state. His eyes held a chilling coldness as he spoke. "It's naughty, but..." Dark tendrils began to emerge from his mouth, a horrifying display of his true nature, revealing a secret he had kept hidden. He held a shadowy mass, warning Roberta, "Do not tell," his words a heavy command. Roberta stared, utterly stunned, as he stood over the old man's lifeless form. His chest wound, deep and gushing, should have been fatal, yet he remained standing, defying all logic. A soft thud echoed as he took a step, a stark contrast to the violence that had just occurred. Then, without warning, he began to fall, Roberta rushing to catch his collapsing frame, fear gripping her heart. She held him close, her expression hardening as she began to chant a powerful spell, desperate to protect him. Her blade hummed with energy, glowing with a fierce, protective light, ready to defend. Roberta invoked her magic, calling upon ancient powers to smite their foolish enemies. As she chanted, Roberta noticed strange red vines pulsating from his deep chest wound, a horrifying discovery. Her eyes widened in shock, realizing the true, horrifying nature of the vines and the implications for our boy. She understood then. The old man wasn't just a puppet. His very form was woven from those same grotesque vines, a revelation that changed everything. Suddenly, a violent force threw him backward, sending him crashing to the floor, disrupting her concentration. Roberta found herself battling not the old man, but a monstrous vine-covered entity, a truly grotesque foe. She fought with fierce determination, urging him to witness her struggle, hoping to inspire him. The vine creature lunged at him, relentless in its assault, even as he lay wounded and vulnerable. Both bodies lay sprawled on the cold stone, a gruesome tableau of the brutal conflict, the air thick with the scent of blood. His chest remained unmoving, soaked in blood, the silence heavy with dread, making Roberta fear the worst. A faint tremor ran through his hand, prompting Roberta to wonder if he felt any pain at all, or if he was something else entirely. Her face was a mask of disbelief as she processed the impossible sight before her, unable to reconcile what she saw with what she knew. His eyes suddenly flared with an eerie white glow, his bloodied mouth twitching, signaling a terrifying shift. Then, impossibly, he began to rise, his body still covered in the gruesome stains of battle, defying death itself. His golden eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity, radiating an otherworldly power, a silent promise of what was to come. A blur of motion, and his silhouette lunged at the vine creature, swift and deadly, delivering a final, decisive blow. Roberta knelt, frozen in a state of profound shock, her blade still clutched in her hand, utterly overwhelmed. A hesitant whisper escaped her lips, questioning the identity of the being before her. "Sire?" He stood, wounds still fresh, a faint, unsettling smile playing on his lips, leaving her to wonder how he could be alive. He stepped through the pooling blood, a silent acknowledgement of the chaos he commanded, seemingly unfazed. The old man lay lifeless, surrounded by splatters of dark, viscous blood, his reign of terror truly over. As he stood, the blood that had flowed from his chest began to reverse, visibly returning to his body, mending his wounds. Roberta watched in disbelief as his wounds visibly closed, the blood reabsorbing into his flesh, leaving no trace of injury. He turned to her, his healing complete, leaving her to grapple with the impossible reality of his existence. He stood before her, completely restored, a silent testament to the terrifying power he truly wielded. This was only the beginning of understanding the immortal's terrifying secret. Our boy, a man of mystery, found himself struck through the stomach and his neck torn open in a brutal attack. Roberta, caught in the chaos, watched in horror, clutching a bloodied knife. Despite the grievous wounds, he stood before her, blood still fresh, an impossible sight that defied all reason. His neck, where it had been ripped open, was already healing, the skin stitching itself back together at an unnatural speed. This was no ordinary magic. It was a healing that drew blood backward and closed wounds without a trace, leaving Roberta bewildered. Her gasp was a silent question, echoing the old man's desperate confusion. Rashid, the old man, knelt in utter despair, his face etched with a grief too deep for words. The chilling reflection of the bloody scene shimmered in a wide, unblinking eye. With a broken voice, Rashid asked if his son had truly died a long, long time ago. Our boy looked at him, his expression somber, and confirmed the heartbreaking truth. Rashid, still on the ground, pleaded for an explanation of the being before him. The cold, hard truth was revealed. The child had been a parasite, a creature wrought by an alchemist. The crushing weight of that revelation settled over Rashid, leaving him utterly devastated. It was a slow, insidious process, as the parasite took root and seized control of the body. His chilling explanation revealed how the creature had merely used fragments of memory to mimic his son. The parasite's actions, even its violent outbursts, were nothing more than a primal instinct to survive. It wasn't protecting Rashid, but rather preserving its own shield, a stark reality that twisted his gut. The gut-wrenching realization that his efforts were for naught, that his wife had been right all along, finally hit him. Others had told him, too, that the child was not alive, that he must kill it. Yet, he had furiously defied them, drawing his blade against anyone who dared speak such a truth. The desperate, misguided act that started it all, Rashid, as an alchemist, weeping as he administered the elixir. His actions had led to countless sins, lives taken, all to turn his gaze from a truth he refused to see. After the storm of revelations, a quiet moment settled, Rashid's exhaustion palpable as he sat with our boy. The raw agony of a father who refused to let go, who had sacrificed everything for a phantom, finally broke free. His profound grief for the child he thought he saved was a torrent of tears. Roberta watched, her expression somber, observing the old man's sorrow with a heavy heart. Our boy looked down at Rashid, a silent witness to a father's broken heart and misguided love. The depth of Rashid's anguish was clear on his tear-streaked face, questioning everything he believed. In a moment of unexpected comfort, our boy knelt and took Rashid's hands in his. His stark declaration about the afterlife shattered Roberta's deeply held beliefs. He looked at Rashid, offering the gentle reassurance that his son had not suffered in death. Soon after, the old man was led away by guards, his fate sealed by the consequences of his actions. Our boy and Roberta watched him go, a somber understanding of the justice to come heavy in the air. Outside, the everyday world continued its rhythm, oblivious to the profound drama that had just unfolded. Roberta walked past the woman, the unsettling calm of Dithmarschen leaving her with a lingering sense of unease. Byrne expressed his genuine relief for her safety, his concern a small comfort in the wake of such events. She walked through an archway, her mind replaying the day's shocking events, each detail weighing heavily. Back in his office, our boy, absorbed in his duties, called out to her, breaking her reverie. Roberta jumped, startled, her surprise evident at being addressed so directly. His quiet invitation for her to speak freely was an unspoken challenge, sensing her internal turmoil. She looked away, her mind a whirlwind of questions, struggling with what she truly wanted to ask. The weight of her new understanding pressed down, leaving her lost in thought, unable to form words. His words about the afterlife, delivered with such conviction, echoed in her mind, unsettling her faith. The traditional teachings of a divided afterlife, where the virtuous ascended to heaven, were suddenly challenged. The stark contrast of eternal damnation for the wicked now felt less certain, less absolute. Her inner turmoil over such a profound contradiction was clear in the worried expression in her eye. He waited patiently, sensing her hesitation, giving her space to process the unfathomable. The priestess stood, grappling with a truth that defied her faith, her worldview teetering on the brink. She clasped her hands, explaining why she couldn't ask, the fear of shattering her entire worldview too great. The immense burden of the truth he carried, a truth that could break others, was palpable. Roberta looked down, making a conscious choice to preserve her current understanding, at least for now. He acknowledged her choice, understanding its depth, and simply returned to his writing. His unexpected remark, drawing a surprising comparison to someone named Alonzo, caught her off guard. A subtle smile played on his lips, hinting at a long history she couldn't possibly comprehend. Her utter confusion at the name was evident, a new mystery unfolding before her. The weight of countless experiences shimmered in his gaze as he explained that others were similar. The memory of Hilde, the previous lord, another who had walked this path before, flashed in her mind. Her voice was barely a whisper as she connected the dots, asking if he meant the previous lord. The ring on his hand, a simple band, was a silent testament to the passage of an unimaginable amount of time. He looked at her, a knowing smile gracing his features, suggesting a future where she, too, would stay. She noticed a subtle shift in his unchanging expression, a hint of the weight of years he carried. The quiet routine of his office, now shared with her, felt like a new chapter beginning. His eyes closed, a profound rest settling over him, deep and undisturbed. He had fallen into a slumber, and the world held its breath, wondering if he would ever open his eyes again. Ulrich, the immortal lord of Dithmarschen, stirred from his deep slumber, a habit that often left those around him bewildered. A gentle rustle echoed through the quiet room as his eyes slowly blinked open. A small child, holding a vibrant bouquet, looked down at him with wide, innocent eyes. She let out a surprised gasp, her small voice calling out in shock. He covered his eyes, still heavy with sleep, as the girl cried out, calling him Daddy. He sat up, holding a small blue flower, a quiet symbol of the season's gentle change. This was the start of a new day, or perhaps a new chapter. His loyal attendant, Kurt, then placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, relieved to find him conscious. He looked at the man, the comfortable silence between them, a testament to their long history. Kurt offered a warm smile, noting the pleasant weather outside. Rubbing his throat as if to clear the lingering fog of sleep, he asked about the time he had lost. Kurt, already pouring drinks, informed him that spring was now in full swing. He offered a cup to his lord, his movements practiced and calm. Kurt then revealed that only a little over a month had passed since he fell asleep, a relatively short duration for him. He remembered the last time he was awake, hunting monsters in the snow-covered lands. He had sought refuge with their tribe at the end of winter, intending to rest, but then simply hadn't woken up. This period of unconsciousness, though bewildering to others, was quite brief by his own standards. Ganymede, the red-haired head priestess, looked at him with an exasperated frown, reminding him that he had told her not to worry. He offered an apology, acknowledging how shocking it must have been to find him lying there like a cadaver. He then explained that a sudden wave of boredom would sometimes wash over him, causing him to fall into a deep slumber. Ganime's expression showed a mix of frustration and grudging acceptance of his peculiar habit. He clarified that this was simply his version of hibernation, a natural state for him. Kurt, ever the diligent servant, announced he would leave them to chat, giving a respectful bow. He then gave a hearty thumbs up, assuring them that Sir Bernhard had handled all the work perfectly in his absence. But his concern was more for Ganymede, and he turned his gaze to her. Her face, looking a little leaner, suggested the immense burden she carried. He asked if she had been doing well as the head priestess, knowing the parish had been in a pitiful state. She admitted that restoring it hadn't been smooth sailing, but insisted it was her responsibility. He understood then that she had sought him out for a more pressing matter. She revealed that guests had arrived in Dithmarschen looking for a guide. These visitors, she explained, were seeking a dragon on the Ice Peninsula, a mythical quest in itself. He began to recount an ancient myth, a story far older than human records. He spoke of a time when the world was consumed by fire and the gods intervened. They drew water from another dimension, a cosmic act of creation. With this water, they began to mold creatures upon the land, breathing life into the nascent world. First, they bestowed intelligence and a name upon a four-legged lizard, creating Ruobhydra, the progenitor of all dragons. Ganymede expressed her surprise, having always believed elves or dwarves were the first intelligent beings. He confirmed that dragons were indeed the first, their history predating all others. He acknowledged that such profound truths were often excluded from human scriptures, which focused primarily on their own kind. The dragons, a species now dwindling, had preserved these tales through generations. Only a few of their kind remained, destined to go extinct before long. He mused that in this current era, there was little luxury to care about a fading race. Yet, these mysterious guests had come specifically looking for a dragon. The leader of the guests, Count Belludo, affirmed their need for a guide familiar with the treacherous Ice Peninsula. Count Belludo's eyes narrowed, a clear sign of his skepticism about Ulrich's identity. He remained calm, his expression unreadable as he faced their scrutiny. Belludo openly questioned if he was truly Lord Ulrich, having heard the Lord was an ancient man. Ganymede, stepping forward, displayed a glowing symbol on her hand, a magical guarantee of his identity. She formally introduced him as Lord Ulrich, the master of Dithmarschen, leaving no room for doubt. Count Belludo and his men bowed respectfully, though their initial shock was palpable. He, with a subtle smirk, accepted their apology, stating that such confusion happened often. He then steered the conversation back to their purpose, asking what kind of dragon they truly sought. Count Belludo explained they were looking for a dragon with pure white, translucent scales, a unique and rare description. He touched his chin thoughtfully, a flicker of recognition in his eyes as he considered the implications of such a quest. Belludo and his companion watched him, a mix of anticipation and apprehension on their faces. His gaze intensified, a clear signal that he understood the true weight of their request. He revealed that the Ice Peninsula, their target destination, was already under the influence of the demon realm. He warned them that the journey was far too dangerous, implying a hidden motive behind their seemingly simple trade request. Belludo protested, claiming he merely wished to trade with the dragon, but he saw through the facade. Ulrich stood firm, ready to challenge the apparent leader of the group, a man he knew was merely a puppet. He wasn't one for beating around the bush. If someone had something to say, they needed to say it themselves. His gaze cut through the pretense, landing on the man who truly held the reins of their small expedition. The man, Bylin, felt a jolt of alarm. The stranger had seen right through his carefully constructed facade. A moment of stunned silence hung in the air, broken by Balin's incredulous denial of the accusation. The pretense couldn't last. With a resigned sigh, Balin confirmed his true position. He was Balin, the Duke of Tolemanka, a hero of the Carbonihar kingdom and a direct descendant of the great king Benares. The Duke felt a profound shock. No one had ever recognized his true identity so easily before. His memory might have been hazy, but a certain familial resemblance had given him the answer. He couldn't fathom how anyone could have known, especially someone who claimed to be only 300 years old. The truth was, he had lived for far longer than that, having gone by many names throughout the centuries. The Duke found this claim impossible, an absurd notion that defied all logic and history. A quiet disbelief settled over the room as the woman beside Balin listened intently. He started to recall the names, ancient echoes from a time long past: Ganian, Ranier, Stein, Rice. Each name brought a fresh wave of surprise, hinting at a history far deeper than she could imagine. There was one more, a name from a time he served a noble in the Villeneuve region, Laurent. The name Laurent struck Balin like a physical blow. A legend from his grandfather's stories suddenly brought to life. He had even added a title to his surname, just as the ancient elves once did. The air crackled with the unspoken implications of such a long and storied past. The Duke's mind reeled. This man was the Figue Laurent, the figure of legend. His grandfather's tall tales, once dismissed as mere fantasy, were now undeniably real. A new understanding dawned on Roberta, her eyes wide with the magnitude of this revelation. If Banaras lived centuries ago, and this man knew him, then he had to be ancient. The implications were staggering, linking the past to their current perilous journey. This meant the Duke himself, a descendant of Banaras, was speaking to someone who had lived through centuries. Our boy simply watched, letting the gravity of his existence sink in. The Duke considered the strange convergence of events, the dragon hunt, the ancient bloodlines. A powerful primal shadow seemed to stretch across the floor, hinting at the true objective of their quest. Its presence was a silent, looming threat, a force that drew them to the desolate polar region. A small, eager figure appeared, carrying a book and a pair of spectacles for our boy. With a grateful nod, he accepted the glasses, a simple gesture amidst the profound revelations. He put on the spectacles, the simple act bringing a new focus to his ancient eyes. The book was a meticulous record of monsters, compiled by his own observations over countless years. The Duke and his companion watched, astonished by the sheer volume of knowledge contained within the pages. Roberta's face tightened with worry as she saw the grim reality of their destination laid bare. He turned to the section on the ice peninsula, explaining how mana had twisted its creatures into grotesque forms. Even the most experienced guides dared not venture into the deepest parts, where Narvakayani resided. The Duke listened, the weight of the upcoming journey settling heavily upon him. He pressed the Duke, asking if he still intended to go without a guide and what his true intentions were upon meeting Narvakayani. The Duke confessed his deep personal struggle. As a dragon hybrid, he could have no descendants. Our boy listened, knowing that the Duke's words carried the heavy burden of a unique and isolating existence. Roberta watched, her expression a mix of sympathy and concern for the Duke's plight. Born a half-human, he felt an almost desperate obsession with his own bloodline. All he wanted was to speak with his father, a connection he had never known. A flicker of understanding passed through his ancient eyes, recognizing a familiar ache. The Duke, humbled by the enormity of his request, looked to Ulrich with desperate hope. He dropped to one knee, a Duke begging for the kindness that Ulrich had once shown his grandfather. Our boy simply stood, letting the weight of the plea hang in the air, his decision unreadable. The Duke's face was etched with raw sincerity, his hands clasped in a silent prayer. He turned to Roberta, asking if she was prepared for the brutal cold of the journey. She admitted she was barely used to the current cold, but her resolve remained firm. He told her it wouldn't be easy, the journey ahead far harsher than anything they had experienced. Despite the challenges, he agreed to lead them, a silent promise to fulfill the Duke's desperate wish. But he laid down one absolute rule. On the ice peninsula, his orders were to be followed without question. One wrong move, one moment of defiance, and the deadly cold would claim them all, leaving no trace behind. On a journey through treacherous snow-covered mountains, the mysterious sire led his companions, the bitter cold biting at their faces with relentless ferocity. Every step was a battle against the elements, and the weariness etched across his features spoke volumes of the ordeal they endured. Behind him, his small group struggled to keep pace, their figures dwarfed by the towering, unforgiving peaks that surrounded them. Icy silence was broken by a sudden sound, a soft, sickening thud that made him turn, his senses instantly on high alert. Roberta, one of his companions, gasped, her eyes wide with a terror that seemed to grip her very soul, a silent scream of pure dread. Her body gave out without warning, sending her tumbling in the deep snow as the harsh environment finally claimed its toll. He caught her in a flash of movement before she could fall completely, his strong arm a steady anchor against the swirling blizzard. Gently, he urged her to rise, his voice calm amidst the storm, promising to support her as she fought to regain her footing. Still struggling on the ground, her strength completely gone, Roberta was vulnerable and dazed by whatever had just struck her. Holding up a strange, gelatinous creature, he explained that this dangerous thing had been the cause of her sudden collapse, nearly stealing her consciousness. Staring at the grotesque entity, she shivered, realizing the true, unseen threat lurking in the snowy wilderness. With calm words, he explained that the creature's secretions caused powerful hallucinations, but thankfully her hat had offered some protection, lessening the full impact. The danger was more widespread than they initially thought. Another companion was also being relieved of a similar, clinging parasite. Highlighting the insidious nature of these invisible, mind-altering predators was this unpleasant task of removing the creature from the other man's head. Stern warnings were given to them all, his gaze sweeping over the perilous cliffs, emphasizing that carelessness meant instant death, urging constant vigilance. As dusk began to settle, a practical decision was made to make camp, finding a small cave where they could seek refuge from the biting winds. Two of the men, clearly exhausted, grumbled about the 2 more days of travel before the descent would become easier, their impatience palpable. Now recovering, she looked at him with curiosity, wondering how he had known about such a perfect, hidden cave in this vast expanse of snow. Simply, he stated he had found it long ago and used it occasionally, his words revealing a deeper history and familiarity with the harsh lands. Gathering firewood, he ignored Roberta's quick observation that the snow had left every piece completely drenched and unusable. Ignoring her concerns, he fixed his intense focus on a piece of wood, a subtle energy beginning to emanate from his hands. Her eyes widened as she watched him, realizing with a start that he was drying the wet firewood using his own magical mana. Admitting to knowing a few tricks, he spoke casually, his understated reply hinting at a depth of power far beyond what he let on. Reflecting on her own struggles with mana control, she acknowledged that while she possessed an abundance of it, her flow was far less refined than his. She confessed that her mana tended to burst out chaotically, unlike his delicate control, and wondered if he had learned his refined techniques from Father Alonso. From him came a pause, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, as Roberta awkwardly explained that Father Alonso, while good-natured, wasn't exactly known for his teaching skills. An offer to help her then came from him, a surprising proposal that left Roberta momentarily stunned, her expression a mix of disbelief and hope. Taking her hand, he reassured her that he had even taught Father Alonso himself, and urged her to trust his guidance. Hesitating for a moment, she assented, the warmth of his hand a comforting presence as she prepared to learn a new, delicate skill. Intently, she concentrated, her brow furrowed in deep thought as she tried to grasp the elusive sensation of channeling mana with precision. Under his gentle guidance, a faint glow began to emanate from her hands, a visible sign that she was successfully manipulating the magical energy. From their joined hands, the mana flowed, a shimmering conduit of power that connected them to the wet wood, ready to transform it. Steam began to rise from the damp logs, evidence that her efforts, combined with his subtle direction, were effectively drying the firewood. Beaming with pride, she exclaimed her success, and he asked if she had finally grasped the unique feeling of mana manipulation. Later, by the now crackling fire, he imparted a timeless truth, reminding her that repetition was the true path to mastering any skill. Genuinely impressed by his patient instruction, she sincerely praised him, calling him a truly good teacher. The Count, one of their companions, chimed in, recalling his grandfather's stories about the Lord's remarkable lessons, and admitted he now understood why. Shrugging, he dismissed his teaching as mere entertainment, a playful deflection that masked his deep satisfaction in nurturing talent. His expression softened as he mentioned King Benares, drawing a surprising connection, implying that even the great king had once been a student of his. Confirming the unspoken, the Count nodded in agreement, explaining that Benares always attributed his success and position to his guidance. Listening intently, she wore a pensive look on her face as the conversation shifted to the philosophy of growth and mentorship. His conclusion was that while he could show the way, ultimately, it was up to the individual, the child, to move forward and embrace their own journey. Inside the cave, the fire now burned brightly, casting a warm glow as a kettle steamed, promising much-needed comfort. A grateful count accepted a cup of songhua tea, its unique aroma filling the cozy cave with a comforting scent. Thanks were offered, the simple gesture of the warm drink, a profound relief in the harsh, unforgiving cold of the mountain. Roberta, however, found the tea smell a bit peculiar, her expression revealing a slight aversion to its distinctive aroma. She then voiced her concern, noting that it had been quite some time since the Lord and the Duke had ventured out, implying a long and arduous journey. Announcing his intention to scout outside, he caused Roberta to exclaim in surprise, questioning why he would leave the warmth of the cave right then. Their jerky and biscuits were insufficient, he explained, and despite her protests, she insisted on accompanying him. Turning to the Count, he instructed him to stay behind and look after the others, entrusting him with their safety. Adding a final request, he asked the Count to melt some snowballs for more songhua tea, a task that showed his faith in the man's capabilities. Understanding the unspoken trust, the Count nodded in acceptance, ready to contribute in his own way to the group's well-being. As they waited, the Count turned to Roberta, suggesting he tell her a story, a way to pass the time and share some history. Her curiosity piqued, Roberta asked what kind of person King Benares truly was, eager to learn more about the legendary figure. Smiling, the Count sensed her intrigue and confirmed her unspoken desire to understand the deep connection between Benares and the Lord of Dithmarschen. His tale then began, explaining that a very famous story from the Carbonihar kingdom revolved around King Benares' life. It was a grand narrative, he explained, centered on 4 mysterious guests who had appeared at critical junctures to save the great King Benares. A first crisis struck when Benares was a mere prince. His father, the reigning king, was brutally assassinated by rebels, leaving the young heir vulnerable. Rebels then sought to eradicate the young Benares to prevent any future revenge, but a lone knight, a guest in the palace, intervened and saved him. This valiant knight, Laurent de Villeneuve, was the very first of these enigmatic saviors, his timely appearance marking the beginning of a legend. The year young Prince Benares turned 10, his father, the king of Carbonihar, was brutally murdered by rebels. They soon extended their cruel reach to the prince himself, determined to eradicate any seeds of future revenge. Just as all hope seemed lost, a knight, a guest of the royal family, appeared and saved him from certain death. This knight, Laurent de Villeneuve, was the first guest, fighting off 6 generals alone for 48 days, allowing the prince to safely flee. 8 years later, a new crisis struck. The rebels pursued Benares, invading even the neighboring country where he had sought refuge. Great King Benares fought bravely until the very end, but was ultimately defeated, locked in a carriage, and dragged back to his kingdom. It was there, in his darkest hour, that the second guest appeared. A hunter, staying in the city where the escort briefly stopped, recognized the prince in his cage. Our boy was a man of quiet determination, his gaze sharp and his presence commanding, even from the shadows. He orchestrated Benares' escape in the dead of night, a daring act that spoke volumes of his character. Leading the prince through a forest rumored to be inhabited by a mad witch, he shook off the pursuing escort, ensuring their freedom. The situations with the third and fourth guests were remarkably similar, each saving Benares from dire circumstances. Once, when the prince was nearly executed after being framed for attempting a coup, an unknown priest brought forth irrefutable evidence of his innocence. Another time, Benares fell into a state of suspended animation for years due to a poisoning attempt. An alchemist arrived, bringing the only known antidote. Having survived these 4 critical moments, Great King Benares eventually brought down the usurper and ascended to the throne, ruling until the age of 90. But the fate of those who saved him remained a mystery, a question that hung heavy in the air. It was said that all 4 of them simply left without receiving any reward, their acts of heroism seemingly forgotten. Once on the throne, the king distributed public proclamations far and wide, desperate to find his saviors. The unique thing about these proclamations was that they didn't bear the saviors' names or descriptions. Instead, they were messages of profound gratitude and blessings. The question lingered for many years. What if those 4 guests were all the same person? A growing unease settled over the group as this possibility was voiced aloud. This thought hadn't occurred to our protagonist until he arrived here, but others had already considered it. Duke Balin, a descendant of great King Benares, firmly believed it to be true, convinced by the weight of history. He was certain that all four saviors were none other than the Lord of Dithmarschen himself. The Duke's conviction stemmed from his lineage, deeply connected to the king's legacy and the stories passed down through generations. Our boy understood this sentiment. Each of their circumstances might be different, but they all felt a lifelong debt to him. Loyalty was not just a word for them, it was a bond forged in gratitude, a promise to stand by him. They intended to follow him to the very end, their dedication unwavering no matter the path. Later, two of the group returned with something heavy in a sack, its contents ominously concealed. When asked what it was, they simply said, meat, their faces betraying no further details. 2 days later, they finally left the treacherous mountains and descended to the plains. Perhaps their guard had dropped, lulled by the easier path ahead, a moment of misplaced comfort. One of the vassals following Count Bellido briefly broke away from the group, a small lapse in vigilance. Suddenly, a monstrous claw struck out from the snow, catching Igor in a brutal blow, the impact jarring. "Bellido! Igor!" our red-bearded friend cried out, his face etched with shock and fear at the sudden attack. Another attack struck Igor, sending him sprawling, his body tumbling helplessly. Blood splattered across the icy ground, a stark red against the white, signaling the severity of the situation. "Damn it," Balin yelled, rushing forward, his protective instincts kicking in. Igor's eyes, wide with terror, reflected the monstrous form towering over him, a chilling sight. The Lord of Dithmarschen, seeing Igor's peril, moved with a decisive strike, severing the monster's claw with his axe. He caught Igor, telling Balin to look after him, his voice calm despite the chaos. Plunging into the chasm with the beast, our boy disappeared from sight, a desperate act of self-sacrifice. The sounds of a brutal struggle echoed from below as the monster fell, its roars cut short by the impact. Our boy descended rapidly, a blur against the white, his fate uncertain in the icy depths. He hit the ground hard, the force of the fall a crushing blow, but his resolve remained. The monster crashed nearby, its massive body creating a tremor, shaking the very earth. He looked up, injured but his gaze fixed, ready to continue the fight even in his battered state. The monster's lifeless body lay sprawled, a testament to the ferocity of the struggle that had just unfolded. From above, Balin screamed, "You can't go down there, Duke!" His voice filled with desperation. Roberta, his red-haired companion, clung to him, desperately trying to hold him back from the precipice. "What are you talking about?" Balin demanded, his voice raw with desperation, unable to comprehend her words. The group watched the chasm, our boy's axe stuck in the snow above, a silent reminder of his fall. Balin and Roberta's faces crumpled in anguish, a desperate plea escaping Roberta's lips. "The Lord won't die, if we don't save him now." Looking down, they saw a pool of blood spreading in the snow, a chilling sight that filled them with dread. Roberta's tearful face reflected her despair, a desperate hope clinging to her words. "You're going to come back, right, sire? Just like back then." A flashback showed our boy, younger, covered in dark blood, a testament to his past struggles and resilience, a memory of impossible survival. The group watched, helpless, as the blood continued to gather in the center of the chasm, a macabre pattern forming. Then, a hand emerged from the bloody snow, followed by our boy, coughing, his body battered and torn, but undeniably alive. "Sire, are you all right?" Balin and Roberta cried, their relief mixed with shock at his miraculous return. Balin, looking at the injured Igor, apologized. "I'm sorry, Balin, I couldn't save him." But our boy, his arm glowing as it healed, simply said, "Bellido wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for you. We should be thanking you rather than making you apologize." Balin, still concerned, asked about the strange glow, a curious energy radiating from his wound. Our boy reassured him it was nothing to worry about. "Although it hurt quite a bit, it will not be a problem. In fact, you are the ones causing troubles," he said, his tone firm. He explained that they had let their guard down, thinking the harsh terrain was behind them, underestimating the new environment. "But we are not the only ones who find this place livable. On the contrary, there are more monsters nesting here than in the snowy mountains." This place, he warned, was even more hazardous, the true beginning of the demon realm, a land far more dangerous than they imagined. If you don't stay sharp, another disaster could strike. I cannot save everyone on my own, so please bear that in mind. Balin, humbled, promised to be more vigilant, his resolve strengthened by the recent events. Roberta's face reflected the heavy atmosphere that had settled with the loss of their vassal. They moved forward, torches lighting the way into the ominous darkness of the forest, the air thick with unspoken fears. This was only the beginning of their trials. The real storm hasn't hit yet. Protagonist Balin and his companions faced the harsh reality of their journey, starting with a solemn prayer for the fallen. At the Duke's request, Balin led the prayer for the dead before they departed, a necessary ritual in the unforgiving landscape. The red-haired Duke knelt in the snow, his expression heavy with grief and resignation as the final rites were performed. Since monsters would swarm once night fell, the ritual was kept brief, a quiet moment of remembrance before they moved on. The Duke placed a simple wooden cross in the snow, a stark marker of another life lost to the wilderness. He held a torch, its flame flickering in the cold, illuminating the somber faces of those gathered for the farewell. The journey continued, a constant struggle against the elements and the dangers lurking in the frozen lands. While the Duke and Balin were away handling business, the group was attacked by a monstrous bird, claiming another life. 3 days later, they were attacked again, and the next day, one man lost a leg, a grim reminder of their vulnerability. After 14 days of relentless travel and loss, they finally arrived at the Lord of Dithmarshan's lair. The Duke, weary and cold, asked Balin if this was the place Narvakayani, the dragon, made his home. Narvakayani had made his lair somewhere in those mountains, a daunting prospect for their exhausted group. The Duke worried they would have to climb the treacherous peaks to find him, a task that seemed impossible. Balin, however, reassured him with a slight smile, promising that such an arduous climb would not be necessary. A wave of relief washed over the Duke as he looked at Balin, grateful for the unexpected reprieve. The group continued their trek through the snow, following Balin towards their mysterious destination. In the distance, a massive, ancient tower loomed against the snowy backdrop, an impossible structure in such a desolate place. The Duke stared in disbelief, wondering why a building like this stood on the remote ice peninsula. Inside the tower, the air was cold and still, the stone walls echoing with silence. Balin's companion, the red-haired man, pointed to strange carvings on the wall, asking if it was writing. It certainly seemed to be, an ancient script etched into the cold stone holding forgotten secrets. The Duke asked his companion if he could read the unfamiliar script, hoping for some insight. But the man shook his head, admitting he couldn't decipher it at all, leaving them in the dark. Balin then stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the ancient carvings, a silent determination in his eyes. Our boy touched the inscription, a connection forming between him and the forgotten words. He revealed that the writing spoke of a last will, a final message from those who once dwelled here. The Duke remembered Balin mentioning a war between elves and dwarves on the ice peninsula. He wondered if this was their language, a relic of that ancient conflict, but Balin denied it. The masters of this tower, Balin explained, were neither dwarves nor elves, but something else entirely. As the era of dwarves was ending, and the era of elves was beginning to rise, another group emerged. They tried to found their own nation, a desperate attempt to carve out a place for themselves in a changing world. It was a trace of human civilization, Balin concluded, one that ultimately failed to survive the tumultuous times. Sitting around a small fire, Balin continued his explanation of the lost civilization. The ice peninsula was originally divided into an island and the mainland, two separate landmasses. Towards the end of the war, the elves, in a desperate move, dragged the island to the mainland. They did this to stop the dwarves who were resisting from their island stronghold, changing the land itself. As a result, the flow of mana became distorted, twisting the very fabric of magic in the region. It was that kind of era when this civilization lived, a time when even the fundamental laws of nature could be manipulated. At the time when even the flow of mana could be twisted, humans were merely caught in the conflict. They lost their lives as pawns in a war between greater powers, their existence fragile and fleeting. However, those fragile humans, against all odds, eventually began to lead the era. The Duke cleared his throat, asking how such a seemingly impossible feat became possible for such a vulnerable race. Balin explained that, according to the scriptures, it was thanks to Lord Hestio, a divine figure. When the gods departed the heavens, Hestio chose to remain on Earth with his human kin. The humans, nurtured in Hestio's embrace, harbored their own ideals and set off on various paths. But they could not overcome the currents of the era, and all met an unjust end, just like the masters of this tower. Overcome with sorrow, Hestio gathered all the remaining humans into a single group. He made one person their master to build a civilization, establishing the first empire and its first emperor. This was how humans, united under the absolute power of the throne, came to possess a power greater than any other race. And that is how humans succeeded in establishing history, rising from fragility to dominance. The Duke then asked if Balin was referring to Ruabydra, the first dragon, drawing a parallel. Balin confirmed it, explaining that Ruabydra had walked almost the exact same path as Hestio. He was offered to leave with the gods, but stayed behind on Earth to save his kin, just like Hestio. Despite trying to walk the same path, Balin continued, dragons and humans met different ends. The Duke, confused, asked why that was, sensing a crucial difference. Balin explained that unlike humans, dragons did not usually group up, their pride preventing unity. Their arrogance brought about the decline of their race, a stark contrast to humanity's rise. Balin knew Narvakayani wouldn't be able to fill the Duke's emptiness, but he had a reason for bringing him here. A sudden, terrifying thud shook the tower, making everyone jump as a massive presence approached. The Duke looked back in horror as the giant's fist smashed through the wall. "My liege!" his companion cried. Balin took the brunt of the impact, shielding the Duke as they were thrown back, the tower crumbling around them. What happens next changes everything, and nobody sees it coming. The immortal's long journey was fraught with peril, danger lurking even in seemingly serene landscapes. He and his loyal priestess, Roberta, found themselves in a tense standoff, their faces etched with grim determination. A chilling realization settled over them, the air growing heavy with an unspoken threat. They were facing a colossal giant, its presence alone enough to make the very ground tremble. The monstrous figure emerged from the snowy pines, a dark silhouette against the moonlit night. Its eyes glowed with an eerie orange light, promising nothing but primal aggression. The giant lunged, its massive hand tearing through the stone corridor where our boy and his companions huddled. Roberta cried out in terror, watching as the giant's massive fist connected with her liege. Our boy was thrown back, but quickly recovered, a powerful spear flying past him, narrowly missing. His eyes narrowed, reflecting the fierce resolve he carried, ready to meet the challenge head-on. His unique whip-like weapon flashed through the air, striking with impossible speed and force. Balin, their other companion, rushed forward, his voice filled with urgent concern for their safety. He quickly confirmed that everyone on their side was unharmed, a small relief in the chaotic aftermath. Roberta, still visibly shaken, was told to stand back, her safety a priority above all else. Her voice trembled as she questioned the command, her instincts urging her to stay close to her protector. Our boy calmly walked towards the fallen beast, his presence exuding an unwavering confidence. He knew that while giants often possess poor wits, they were still intelligent beings, not mere monsters. This particular giant, however, had acted with mindless aggression, a rare and dangerous exception. He raised his weapon once more, preparing to deal the final, decisive blow. His whip struck again, a crimson blur against the stark white of the snow, ending the threat decisively. He stood over the defeated giant, his posture calm despite the recent struggle. The giant lay motionless, its glowing eyes now fixed and vacant, its menace gone. He looked down at the fallen creature, two thought bubbles hovering above him, a silent contemplation. A final, eerie glow faded from the giant's eye, marking the complete cessation of its life force. He stood in the quiet forest, the cold air biting, reflecting on the encounter. He spoke, his words carrying a weight of experience, a profound understanding of these ancient beings. His gaze was distant, lost in thoughts of past battles and the complex nature of the world. Roberta, exhausted from the ordeal, drifted off to sleep, her head bowed in slumber. Gently he roused her, his touch light and reassuring. She jolted awake, startled but quickly calming as she met his gaze. He advised her to rest comfortably, emphasizing the need to conserve her strength. Their journey was nearing its destination, and the path ahead was still uncertain. Roberta looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and lingering concern. As they journeyed onward, 3 imposing figures appeared in the distance, their silhouettes stark against the snowy peaks. Our boy and Roberta watched them approach, a new tension rising in the air. They soon found themselves face to face with a group of giants, but these were different. The elder giant, Ulrich, knelt before our boy, his massive frame showing respect. Ulrich embraced him, a booming laugh echoing through the mountains, overjoyed to see his long-lost acquaintance. So much time had passed since their last meeting, a testament to our boy's enduring existence. Ulrich, marveling at the passage of time, asked if it had been a decade since they last spoke. He corrected him, noting it had been a little over 12 years, a mere blink for beings like them. Ulrich's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and amusement at the precise memory. Balin observed the elder giant, realizing this creature was vastly different from the one they had just fought. Even so, Ulrich had heard much of what had transpired in the world during his long absence. The elder giant possessed his own unique ways of gathering information, a network of whispers and ancient knowledge. Ulrich then looked at Roberta, a mischievous glint in his eye, and asked if our boy had found a new woman. Roberta's face flushed with a mix of surprise and embarrassment, quickly denying any such implication. He clarified that Roberta was his priestess, explaining that Alonso had raised her. Ulrich's gaze lingered on Roberta, a sudden thought striking him about Alonso raising a child. Roberta looked away, flustered, while he remained impassive, used to Ulrich's bluntness. Our boy confirmed that he had indeed been seeking out the elder giant, his purpose now clear. Ulrich then asked if his search was connected to Narvakayani, a name that carried significant weight between them. Balin stepped forward, bowing respectfully, and revealed himself as a descendant of Narvakayani. Ulrich's eyes widened in astonishment. A descendant of that legendary figure appearing before him. The elder giant reached out, gently cupping Balin's head, saying he was pleased to finally meet him. Balin's neck bore subtle markings, a clue to his extraordinary heritage. Ulrich, studying the young man, deduced that Balin's human parent must have been his mate. He confirmed that Balin was a dragon-human hybrid, a lineage of incredible rarity. He then produced a small pouch, offering it as payment for their assistance. The contents of the bag, received from the forest elves, were a valuable offering for the giants. Our boy then made his request, asking Ulrich if he would guide them to the sacred entrance. Ulrich took the pouch, his expression thoughtful, considering the terms of the agreement. With a decisive nod, the elder giant signaled to his companions, confirming their acceptance of the task. Roberta and Balin exchanged surprised glances, their relief palpable at the unexpected alliance. Roberta's mouth hung open slightly, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief at how easily things had unfolded. Far away, a different scene unfolded under a vibrant, clear sky, a serene and beautiful landscape. A figure with flowing white hair and elegant hands sat, seemingly lost in thought, yet acutely aware. The figure sensed an approaching presence, a shift in the delicate balance of their world. Roberta's worried face flashed in our boy's mind, a quiet reminder of the challenges still ahead. Balin's gaze rested on the back of one of the giants, a symbol of their newfound powerful allies. The white-haired figure's hands, adorned with simple bands, moved with a quiet grace, preparing for what was to come. This mysterious individual looked out, ready to welcome the imminent arrival, and nobody could truly guess their intentions. The biting wind whipped around the woman's face as their unusual journey brought them closer to their destination, a place shrouded in mystery and ice. These colossal giants, a testament to raw power, moved through the treacherous mountain pass with an unyielding stride, making the impossible trek seem effortless. Their goal was clear, a hidden entrance deep within the snowy peaks, a place rumored to hold secrets as old as time itself. Our guide, Ulrich of Dithmarschen, sat calmly in the giant's massive hand, his demeanor betraying no fear despite the perilous heights and the immense scale of their mounts. He knew that finding a safe path for humans would have taken days, but the giant's brute strength allowed them to simply push forward. The group gathered, their eyes fixed on the distant mountain, anticipating the moment they would finally reach the enigmatic entrance. A playful, yet firm, thud from one of the giants reminded the red-haired man that even their protectors had a rough way about them. He grunted, feeling the impact, a small but sharp reminder of the giant's immense power, even in a gentle nudge. One of the giants offered a word of encouragement, a deep rumble that promised strength and success in their challenging quest. The journey continued, a relentless march through an endless expanse of white, each step bringing them closer to the unknown. A small party paused on the snowy ground, waiting for the unseen signal, a silent understanding passing between them. A sudden, ethereal whisper in their minds caught the woman off guard, her eyes widening in disbelief at the impossible sound. Her surprise was palpable, a mix of awe and trepidation as the mysterious voice invited them to step inside. Our guide confirmed he heard the voice too, and without hesitation, instructed everyone to follow him towards the unseen entryway. With a graceful movement, he extended his hand, and pure mana began to swirl, bending the very fabric of the frozen air around them. The woman gasped, utterly stunned as the raw magical energy pulsed, initiating a transformation she could scarcely comprehend. Both she and the red-haired man pointed, their faces etched with disbelief as the desolate winter landscape began to visibly change. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple, the sheer impossibility of what unfolded before her taxing her mind and senses. The mana intensified, blooming into vibrant, otherworldly petals that drifted gently through the air, painting the scene with impossible colors. She closed her eyes, feeling the sudden, inexplicable warmth on her skin, a stark contrast to the biting cold they had just endured. They stepped forward, leaving the harsh winter behind, entering a realm of vibrant blue skies and lush green fields that defied all logic. The woman voiced the question everyone thought, wondering if this breathtaking scenery was merely a trick of the mind. Her expression remained one of profound wonder, struggling to reconcile the impossible beauty with the reality she knew. Our guide assured her it was all real, a testament to the dragon's power to manipulate mana and create nature itself. The warm air enveloped them, a luxurious comfort that seemed utterly impossible given their previous location, further deepening the mystery for the others. A vast, verdant field stretched out before them, bathed in soft, ethereal light, proving the impossible had indeed become tangible. Our guide's gaze was solemn, understanding the ancient power that allowed a dragon to scope reality in such a magnificent way. He led them onward, deeper into the serene landscape, towards the white-haired figure who awaited their arrival. The white-haired dragon, Kayani, sat casually amidst the created paradise, his presence radiating an ancient, almost indifferent power. He offered a single teacup, his gesture a subtle, almost mocking, acknowledgement of their unexpected numbers. The dragon addressed our guide by his former name, a clear sign of their shared ancient history and the dragon's vast knowledge. The dragon's hands were gracefully clasped, his elegant posture belying the immense power that resided within him. The woman's face was a mask of shock, overwhelmed by the revelation of the white-haired figure's true nature. The dragon then spoke of dragons' ability to change their appearance, hinting at the vast, incomprehensible powers they possessed. A fleeting shadow of a magnificent dragon soared above, a powerful reminder of their true, majestic forms. The woman couldn't help but notice the dragon's ethereal beauty, a striking contrast to the danger and power he exuded. He then turned his gaze, stating plainly that someone had journeyed far to meet him, shifting the focus of their visit. With a surprising intimacy, Kayani reached out, his long fingers gently touching the red-haired man's cheek. The red-haired man recoiled slightly, his confusion deepening at the dragon's strange, unsettling gesture. A brief flicker in Kayani's eye revealed a reptilian slit, a momentary glimpse of his true, ancient nature beneath the human guise. Then came the bombshell. The white-haired dragon declared the red-haired man was his son, a revelation that silenced the entire group. Our guide watched the exchange, his expression unreadable as the ancient dragon acknowledged his unexpected offspring. The son's face contorted in profound shock, the words, "My son?" escaping his lips in a whisper of disbelief. He then identified his mother as Penelope, hoping the name would spark recognition in the ancient dragon. The dragon looked at the son, and a faint echo of memory seemed to stir within his ancient eyes, connecting him to the past. He remembered Penelope, a human woman who had once captivated his attention in a way few others ever had. The memories shifted to a dark alley where a young, fierce Penelope fought for her life, a dagger clutched in her hand. It was there, in his human form, that Kayani had rescued her from attackers, an act that had forged an unexpected bond. Penelope, strong-willed and spirited, had smiled at him then, a refreshing defiance in her eyes that had drawn him in. He found her refreshing, a stark contrast to the mundane existence he often observed among humans. The sun, still reeling from the past, challenged Kayani, demanding to know what any of this had to do with his own existence. The dragon simply looked away, his dismissive posture communicating a complete lack of emotional investment in the past or the present. The small group watched in tense silence, caught in the emotional crossfire between father and son. The dragon stated his core philosophy. He had no interest in forming attachments, dismissing any notion of paternal bond. His face remained impassive, a mask of cold detachment that offered no comfort or warmth to his son. His relationship with Penelope, he explained, had merely been an attempt to understand human nature, a form of imitation. The son's expression shifted, a dawning, painful realization spreading across his features as the truth sank in. The dragon confirmed it. Every gesture, every moment with Penelope had been nothing more than an act. The son's fist clenched tightly, his pain and anger simmering beneath the surface, a silent protest against the dragon's cruelty. His voice trembled as he asked the most agonizing question: was his very existence, his birth, utterly meaningless to his father? The dragon, ever the observer, explained that humans constantly strive to attribute meaning to their lives through various societal constructs. He looked at his son with an almost clinical gaze, perhaps a flicker of pity, but mostly a profound indifference. A faint, almost amused smile touched Kayani's lips, finding human endeavors to find meaning an exhausting pursuit. Then, Kayani asked the pivotal question, cutting to the heart of the matter: was his son tired of living as a mere human? Our guide and the woman exchanged surprised glances, realizing the true, deeper reason for the son's perilous journey. The dragon slowly extended his hand, an offer of immense power, a chance to shed the very essence of his humanity. His fingers gently touched the son's face, initiating the ancient ritual of molting, the beginning of a profound transformation. The woman and our guide watched, their expressions a mixture of awe and apprehension as the magic began to unfold. A torrent of brilliant white energy erupted around the sun, swirling and coalescing, signaling the start of his new destiny. His form began to shift, scales emerging, and a powerful serpentine tail started to take shape, signaling the change. The dragon's voice echoed, promising to help him shed the entirety of his human shell, fulfilling his son's deepest desire. The son looked up, his face a canvas of wonder and shock as he witnessed his own body transforming, becoming something ancient and powerful. Before him, the majestic head of a dragon fully manifested, fierce and beautiful, a reflection of his impending true form. Our boy stood, no longer fully human, his hand now a formidable dragon's claw, ready to embrace the overwhelming power that awaited him. This was only the beginning of a destiny few could ever imagine. Laurent, a man caught between worlds, found himself on a precarious boundary. His past hopes centered on molting into a dragon, easing the pain of an existence too long for human connection. Slowly, a chilling realization dawned on him. A majestic dragon form revealed a truth far colder than he anticipated. Our hero now truly understood the aloof, indifferent nature of dragons, a stark contrast to his human experiences. Grim expression settled on his face, reflecting the heavy weight of this new understanding. Our boy questioned the Duke, asking if molting could truly fail, leaving him in an eternal human form. The Duke confirmed the risk. Success wasn't guaranteed, and failure meant being trapped in his current state forever. His loyal priestess, Roberta, couldn't hold back her anger, accusing the Duke of knowing this outcome from the very start. Her face was a mask of shock and indignation, betraying the depth of her concern for him. Alone in the vast field, he reflected on his own complex motives for seeking this transformation. Initially, he had believed that confronting his dragon father and molting would resolve all his troubles, but that hope now seemed naive. Kayani, the ancient dragon, merely yawned, an indifferent gesture that underscored the man's growing uncertainty about becoming a true dragon. His gaze fixed on the Duke, disappointment mixing with a silent question about the immense sacrifices made for such an ambiguous ending. Worried faces of loyal vassals watched from a distance, reflecting the uncertain path their liege now faced. Contemplating molting, he wondered if it might free him from the trivial concerns that plagued his human heart. Reality hit hard from the Duke, stating that such an outcome was likely impossible for him. Explaining his fate, the Duke asserted that even as a dragon he would never be like Kayani, forever marked by his human past. Standing together, our protagonist and the Duke surveyed the vast green expanse, emphasizing the immense chasm he straddled. Memories of holding a small baby, of the warmth and innocence of human life, flashed through his mind. Images of children running freely, of the simple joy of understanding others, highlighted the preciousness of his human experiences. Recalling moments of shared laughter around the campfire, he cherished the comfort of living together, all vital parts of his identity. These cherished human memories, the Duke told him, would prevent him from ever truly becoming a different being like Kayani. An outstretched hand from the Duke presented a ring, a subtle symbol that introduced a daring new proposal for him. Oscar, as the Duke once was, recounted his own past, wandering the world alongside Kayani, an experience that slowly piqued the dragon's interest in humanity. Kayani, the white-haired dragon, and Roberta stood on a balcony, their relaxed demeanor hinting at Kayani's subsequent attempts to understand human nature. Our boy looked up, a mix of confusion and dawning understanding on his face, as the Duke revealed that Kayani's curiosity had ultimately led to his very existence. A novel solution came from the Duke. He should journey with Kayani and teach the ancient dragon about humanity. His eyes widened in disbelief, the weight of the Duke's suggestion hitting him hard as he realized it meant leaving the nest once more. Before the towering dragon, he listened to the Duke outline the immense task, a challenge that seemed almost impossible to overcome. Kayani's ancient eye, deep and knowing, seemed to emphasize the vast stretches of time that both he and the Duke had to undertake this journey. A strategist at heart, the Duke explained this long endeavor could prevent the crushing boredom that often afflicted beings of immense lifespan. My guy voiced his doubt, asking how he could possibly achieve something that even the Duke, in his own time, had failed to accomplish. Looking at him with an encouraging gaze, the Duke suggested that he, standing on the unique boundary, might actually have a better chance at success. A glint in his eye revealed a flicker of hope, as the Duke spoke of him becoming a bridge between two vastly different worlds. The Duke's hand, still bearing the symbolic ring, gestured towards the sky, emphasizing that their combined journey would ultimately prove truly worthwhile. With a gentle hand on his head, the Duke made a direct personal appeal, asking him, Laurent, descendant of Benares, to undertake this crucial mission. A moment of profound silence passed as he absorbed the gravity of the Duke's request, weighing the immense responsibility. His face contorted with a mix of pain and resolve, but in the end he agreed to the Duke's proposal, accepting his destiny. The Duke offered a small, knowing smile, extending his hand as he instructed him to reach out when the time was right, whenever he was ready. After the Duke awakened his father's ancient blood, he and Kayani made the momentous decision to travel the world together, embarking on their shared quest. Kayani, holding a teacup with an air of refined nonchalance, declared that there was simply no reason for him to refuse this intriguing proposition. The ancient dragon, a subtle smile playing on his lips, admitted he was genuinely curious about how fragile humans managed to lead entire eras. Observing Kayani's flippant remarks, Roberta let out a frustrated, "Ugh," while the Duke remained serenely calm beside her. Her eyes widened in disbelief and a hint of disgust as she watched Kayani casually sip from his teacup, seemingly unbothered by her presence. Our boy, Kayani, and Roberta shared a quiet moment over tea in the sunny field, the calm before the storm of their respective journeys. Then he and his loyal vassals from the Carboni Heart Kingdom parted ways, each setting off on their own uncertain paths. Roberta and the Duke watched them go, her gaze distant as she reflected on the ultimate fates that awaited those who ventured into the unknown. Her own time, she knew, was not long enough to witness the conclusion of their epic journeys. Days later, in the shadowy depths of Dithmarschen, the Duke, now wearing spectacles, prepared for a new encounter. Roberta, confronting him directly, demanded to know why he had summoned her at such a late hour, sensing a deeper purpose behind his request. Her peculiar feeling, a persistent unease that had settled in during their travels, now intensified as she looked at him with growing suspicion. She then asked a question that hung heavy in the air, her voice steady. Was he planning to leave Dithmarschen, abandoning them all once again? The answer would determine everything. The story of Ulrich, an immortal burdened by long lives and countless partings, now turns towards a new chapter. Months had passed since his arduous journey to the Ice Peninsula concluded, bringing a quiet interim to his days. Dithmarschen had gracefully transitioned from the gentle embrace of spring into the vibrant warmth of summer. Snow that once blanketed the land had completely melted, and a shimmering heat haze now danced above the fields. Yet, despite the daytime warmth, the nights retained a chilling grip, as if winter itself refused to fully retreat. Cold was particularly harsh in the early mornings, making even simple prayers a difficult task for Roberta. A deep worry gnawed at her, a silent question about the man she served. Inside his study, Ulrich continued his nightly work, his pen scratching against parchment, seemingly oblivious to the chill. Roberta, lantern in hand, arrived at his door, a rare and unexpected visit at such an hour. Hesitantly, she stepped into the dimly lit room, her presence a quiet disruption to his solitude. Ulrich looked up, his expression calm, as Roberta voiced her concern about disturbing him. "Not at all," he assured her, offering a slight gesture. He always welcomed someone to talk to, especially since he rarely slept at night anyway. Shivering, she pulled her cloak tighter and asked why his room felt so profoundly cold. Wondering aloud, she asked if he simply didn't feel it, or if his long life had numbed him to such sensations. Our boy confirmed he felt the cold keenly, but simply didn't show it. It was an adaptation, he explained, built over the countless years he had endured. Pondering his words, Roberta asked if one truly adapted to the cold if they lived long enough. His answer held a quiet, distant sadness. Turning his gaze to her, he sensed the deeper question she held, inviting her to speak her mind. Taking a moment, Roberta revealed the premonition that had weighed on her. A strong feeling told her he was planning to leave Dithmarschen, as she needed to know if it was true. Our boy confirmed her premonition, stating simply that he was indeed planning to leave. Under names like Laurent and Oscar, he had left countless footprints throughout history, each one a testament to his long existence. 300 years had passed since he began his current life as Ulrich of Dithmarschen. This time for his departure, he calmly declared, had arrived. Ulrich spoke with a quiet certainty, revealing that it was simply about time for him to move on. A gasp escaped Roberta, a sudden realization dawning on her as his words sank in. Pressing him, she needed to understand the full weight of his decision and what it truly meant. His intention reiterated, he then explained that he had stayed in Dithmarschen because of a promise to Hilda. Hilda had asked him to protect the people from the harsh blizzards of the Little Ice Age, even after her death. That promise he had honored, remaining in this place for centuries. But now, winters have grown shorter, a sign of the changing times. Temperatures were rising with each passing year, indicating the end of the Little Ice Age. Even without his direct intervention, the people of Dithmarschen would now be able to survive. His commitment was finally fulfilled, though it had taken longer than he expected. His promise, he simply stated, was now complete. Later, Roberta then asked if, after long years, he hadn't grown attached to the place. Her eyes held a mixture of sadness and understanding, recognizing the profound impact centuries of life could have. Admitting his attachment, he emphasized it did not equate to an eternal bond. Later, he referenced Balin's observation about how clans eventually become more distant than strangers. Balin had once remarked that the current clan was now more distant to him than strangers, a sentiment Ulrich understood deeply. An analogy followed. Imagine he had a friend named Eva, and she asked him to care for her child before she died. That child, he would raise, who looked just like Eva, with the utmost care. A continuous line of descendants would follow, from one child to another. After 5 or 6 generations, he would no longer see any trace of Eva in them. At that point, he wouldn't be staying by their side simply because they were Eva's descendants. While he would have grown attached to them, that attachment had its limits. Staying with them forever, just because they were precious, was too much. 300 years was a long time. Nothing in this world, he stated, truly lasts forever. Meetings and partings in life were as inevitable as sunrises and sunsets. Listening intently, Roberta's expression grew heavy with the weight of his words, understanding the profound loneliness of his long existence. Seeing him as a dragon who embraced a single human, she noted he decided to part ways without any lingering feelings. While humans endured countless partings and swallowed all sorts of emotions. Unlike Duke Balin, whose feelings were clear, the Lord was like burnt-out ash. Perhaps, she thought, the cold wasn't the only thing he had grown numb to over the years. Then she asked him who would succeed him when he left. Burn, he answered simply, identifying his chosen successor. Burn, he explained, would take his place. Roberta, surprised, asked if Sir Bernhardt was, by any chance, his descendant. Confirming Burn was his descendant, he clarified they were not related by blood. Hilda had been unable to bear children. Hilda's clan, he explained, now carried the blood of Hilda's relatives and the adopted children she had raised. The main family of his successor, the House of Meyer, were descendants of Hohenlohe, Hilda's eldest adopted child. They had long been sending their children to him, an unspoken plea to make him remember Hohenlohe and stay. But as he had said before, it was all in vain. Hohenlohe and his descendants were entirely separate individuals to him. Finally, he turned to Roberta, a knowing smile on his face, and asked if she would like to come with him. Roberta's heart stopped. A royal wedding was announced, pulling a quiet man from his peaceful life into the heart of the kingdom's politics. An elegant invitation, sealed with the crest, was carefully cut open. Inside his home, the man listened as a priestess recounted the news. The crown princess would soon have her royal wedding. He inquired about the groom, a detail that carried more weight than simple curiosity. The priestess revealed the groom was the eldest son of the Marquis of Quelle, a name of significant power. A deep thought crossed his mind. The civil war had only recently ended, leaving the kingdom in a fragile state. Bringing in a son-in-law from within the country, he realized, was a calculated move to ensure stability rather than risking an outside alliance. The priestess, seeing his reasoning, simply agreed that his logic made perfect sense. His gaze drifted, lost in reflection on the turbulent past that had shaped their present reality. That war, a brutal and bloody conflict, had ignited just 5 years earlier. It began with the tragic death of the crown prince, a loss that plunged the kingdom into chaos. A desperate bloodbath erupted among the royal siblings, each vying for the vacant throne. Brothers turned against brothers, their shared lineage forgotten in the brutal fight for power. The conflict rapidly escalated, engulfing the entire region and dragging all the people of Osnover into a massive, devastating war. For 32 long years, the kingdom endured the civil war's relentless grind, seemingly without end. Then, a single man emerged, standing at the very front lines of the dying conflict. He had hired mercenaries from neighboring countries, using overwhelming force to bring countless families to their knees. Just as the war seemed poised to finally conclude, a new and unexpected chapter began. He suddenly turned his forces, invading the territory of Dithmarschen without warning. The outcome of that bold, decisive move was swift and absolute. A shadowy figure, the architect of this final conquest, appeared, his presence radiating immense, chilling power. His eyes, glowing with a cold intensity, reflected the ambition that had driven him to reshape the kingdom. With his victory, the crown of Osnover passed entirely to the Hilderson clan, the new masters of Dithmarschen. The priestess, connecting the dots, asked if this meant His Majesty Richard, the current king, was from that very clan. The man confirmed it with a simple nod, acknowledging the truth of her deduction. Our boy, Richard, now wore the crown, a heavy symbol of the power he had inherited. The man, his adopted father, held a letter from Richard, confirming the deep bond between them despite their political distance. The priestess, Roberta, looked at the man with a hint of exasperation, noting how peacefully he lived in such a remote place despite his connections. He then asked if she would be attending the royal wedding, reminding her that the crown princess was, after all, her granddaughter. Roberta sighed, her expression showing a reluctant acceptance that she had little choice but to go. He suspected that Richard was dealing with some troublesome affair, a problem important enough to warrant his father's presence. Roberta, surprised, asked if he meant something truly troublesome, her brow furrowing with concern. He explained that the letter hadn't specified, but it seemed to be a problem Richard couldn't resolve with his own power. It made sense, he thought, considering he hadn't even attended Richard's coronation, creating a distance between them. There had to be a significant reason for Richard to call him now, after all this time. Roberta, ever the pragmatist, wondered aloud if Richard simply wanted to see his father's face after so long. A soft, introspective "ah" escaped him, a quiet acknowledgement of the hidden truths in her words. Then she offered, asking if he would like her to accompany him on this journey to the capital. Roberta looked genuinely surprised by her own offer, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. He, in turn, was taken aback, asking, Me? His voice tinged with disbelief. He pressed her, asking if she was truly being serious about such a proposal. With a calm, unwavering gaze, he affirmed that he was always serious, leaving no room for doubt. Compared to a journey to the Ice Peninsula, he reasoned, this trip would feel like a mere vacation for her. He gently reminded her that she had successfully reorganized the parish and completed all the major rituals, freeing her of pressing duties. Roberta held a scroll, reminding him that the Ice Peninsula had technically been within her jurisdiction, implying the capital was not. She asserted her duty as a priestess was to protect her post, and leaving it would be abandoning her responsibilities. Suddenly, a scroll bearing the Holy Church's seal was presented to her, an undeniable decree. Roberta's eyes widened in shock, her previous arguments dissolving in the face of such an authoritative command. He calmly took a sip of tea, completely unfazed by the sudden turn of events, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. The scroll stated unequivocally that Priestess Roberta was to fulfill all his requests without any delay, binding her to his will. Completely flustered and defeated, Roberta could only stare at the scroll, her protests silenced. Later, Roberta walked away with a defeated slump, acknowledging his departure. So, you're leaving after all. He simply agreed, his voice calm, confirming his decision to embark on the journey. He reflected on how Richard had stayed by his side for a long time, sharing a deep, unspoken bond. He mused that his adopted son must have vaguely sensed that this moment, his father's departure, would eventually come. Richard, looking at him with unwavering eyes, asked, "What is there to fear?" His confidence a testament to his father's teaching. His father offered a final reassurance, telling Richard that he was more suited to rule Dithmarschen than anyone else. The priestess, traveling with her companions, expressed surprise that major national events were no longer held in Solna, the home of the Grand Temple. The grand white spires of the temple stood under a clear blue sky, a symbol of the spiritual heart of the kingdom. Our boy explained that King Richard, detesting the interference of priests, had moved the capital to Eiselberg, away from the Pantheon's influence. The map showed Eiselberg and Dithmarschen, their destination, lay on opposite ends of the kingdom, promising a long and arduous journey. Their path led them through a vibrant, lush forest, a beautiful, but seemingly endless expanse of green that stretched before them. The cloaked man rode with a quiet intensity, his gaze steady as they ventured deeper into the unfamiliar territory. The priestess, looking around at the verdant canopy, found it ironic that this place was known as the Snow Forest, given its current appearance. He shared the history of the region, explaining how the forest was once covered in snow due to its proximity to the Ice Peninsula. The young boy's eyes lit up at the mention of snow elves, creatures he likely only knew from stories and legends. But the cloaked man clarified that the elves could no longer thrive there. The rising temperatures had driven them away, just as humans couldn't live on the Ice Peninsula. The priestess acknowledged the convenience of their route through the forest, but then asked if he truly knew the way after so much time. The young boy's wide-eyed reaction perfectly captured the priestess's own incredulity when our boy revealed his last visit was 80 years ago. He recalled coming to this area, which belonged to the county of Guten, to hunt monsters with the vassals of the time. The priestess listened, a hint of concern in her expression as she processed the vast span of time he was casually referencing. A bead of sweat trickled down her face, reflecting the quiet awe and perhaps a touch of unease she felt regarding his ancient past. They continued their journey, the forest slowly transitioning as the day waned, bringing them closer to their destination. As night fell, they made camp, a small fire casting dancing shadows as the three travelers found rest within the ancient woods. The following afternoon, they finally arrived at the village, only to be met by a guard aiming a crossbow from behind a wooden barricade. An arrow whizzed past, narrowly missing the cloaked man as he deftly dodged the unexpected attack, his horse rearing in alarm. The priestess gasped, her face contorted in shock and fear at the sudden, violent reception they had received. She quickly stepped forward, placing herself between the wary villagers and her companions, her hand raised in a gesture of peace. The guard, a woman with a determined expression, kept her crossbow trained on the newcomers, clearly ready to defend her home. The priestess assured her young companion that she would handle the situation, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. She called out to the guard, asking her to lower her weapon, her tone firm but gentle, seeking to de-escalate the confrontation. With a prayer to Ganymede, she explained they were merely passing travelers, seeking shelter for the night with no ill intentions. The guard's eyes widened in recognition, her expression shifting from hostility to surprise as she realized the identity of the woman before her. She immediately lowered her weapon and bowed deeply, repeatedly apologizing for her rudeness, clearly ashamed of her actions towards a priestess. The priestess, understanding their caution, graciously accepted the apology, acknowledging that their sudden appearance might have been startling. The guard, still flustered, stammered out an apology, feeling that her humble village was hardly a suitable place to host such a revered figure. The priestess, however, simply smiled, stating that any place providing shelter from the night wind would be perfectly fine for them. Convinced, the guard offered to escort them to the village chief's house, finally allowing them entry into the settlement. As they walked through the village, curious villagers emerged from their homes, murmuring amongst themselves, their gazes following the unexpected visitors. The children, particularly, seemed fascinated, peeking out from behind fences, their innocence a stark contrast to the early attention. The priestess turned to our boy, wondering if the village had been so welcoming 80 years ago when he last visited. His gaze became distant, his expression grave as he recalled the profound difference between the past and the present state of the village. He remembered how monsters typically hid in desolate places, waiting to ambush their prey in the shadows. But sometimes, these creatures would break from their usual patterns, their massive forms looming menacingly over terrified villages. These were not ordinary beasts. Occasionally, they would launch brutal attacks on human settlements, driven by an unknown destructive urge. He remembered the grim reality of these monsters, fearless and relentless, their glowing eyes fixed on their targets. Their sheer brute force and tendency to sweep everything away meant entire villages could be wiped out in a single, horrific onslaught. The priestess shed a somber memory of her own, recalling a disaster zone she once visited with Alonso, a place of unspeakable horror. Our boy looked around the bustling, rebuilt village, a silent testament to the resilience of its people in the face of such devastation. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, acknowledging the incredible feat of rebuilding this community from the ashes. Inside the chief's house, the guard announced their arrival, calling out to Lumen, the village elder. Chief Lumen, an old man with a kind face, looked up from his chair, a curious escaping his lips. His eyes, though aged, held a sharp intelligence as he processed the news of unexpected visitors. The guard bowed respectfully, explaining that a priestess of Ganymede and her companions had come seeking shelter. Chief Lumen rose slowly, his surprise evident at the mention of a priestess gracing their humble abode. Introducing himself as Lumen, the chief of the village, he offered them a warm, if somewhat bewildered, welcome. The priestess, in turn, apologized for their sudden intrusion, hoping they hadn't caused any inconvenience. Chief Lumen, ever gracious, dismissed her apology, insisting that it was his village that should be apologizing for its humble state. An older woman, perhaps the chief's wife, smiled kindly from the background, adding to the warm reception. But as the chief spoke, his gaze lingered on our boy, a flicker of recognition passing through his aged eyes. Our boy met his gaze, his expression unreadable, waiting for the inevitable realization to dawn. The chief's eyes suddenly widened in profound shock, a gasp catching in his throat as the impossible truth hit him. He stammered out a name. Lord Ulrich? The question laden with disbelief and a hint of reverence, bridging 80 years in a single moment. Our boy offered a faint, knowing smile, acknowledging the chief's recognition without needing to speak a word. The old chief looked up at the seemingly ageless figure, the weight of a lifetime of memories rushing back, his face a mixture of awe and wonder. It was the child he remembered from 80 years ago, the one who had saved his village from the brink of destruction, and his return promised that the past was far from over. The chapter begins with an ancient title card, setting the stage for Lord Ulrich's long and enigmatic existence and his immortal way of life. 80 years ago, a young boy found himself in a terrifying scramble, fleeing a monstrous attack that had utterly devastated his home. He pushed through the dark, panting heavily, his small body shuddering with exhaustion and raw fear. The aftermath of the monster's rampage was grim, with countless villagers lying still amidst the ruins of their homes. Collapsed on the ground, the boy clutched his father's lifeless body, his heart breaking with a grief too profound for his young age. Despite his own injuries, he managed to hoist his wounded sister onto his back, determined to save the last piece of his family. A terrifying presence loomed, and the ground vibrated with heavy footsteps as the monster arrived, its shadow falling over them. Its jaws, lined with razor-sharp teeth and dripping with saliva, opened wide, a horrific maw promising instant annihilation. The boy could only recoil in abject terror, his small body frozen as the monstrous form bore down upon him. His face contorted in a silent scream, pure terror etched into his features as he braced for the inevitable impact. A sudden, violent burst of blood splattered across the screen, signaling the monster's brutal attack, quick and merciless. He lay there, covered in blood, his body bruised and broken, the pain a searing reminder of his helplessness. Just as despair threatened to consume him, a flash of purple light erupted, cutting through the monster's assault, signaling a powerful intervention. The boy's wide, tear-filled eyes watched in stunned silence as his unexpected savior moved, a beacon of hope in the chaos. A powerful hand, wreathed in dark, arcane energy, struck with impossible speed, deflecting the monster's attack. The mysterious figure, Lord Ulrich, moved with lethal grace, his blade a blur of purple energy as he carved through the monstrous beast. The boy could only watch, captivated, as the fight unfolded, his mind struggling to comprehend the sudden turn of events. Ulrich stood, calm and resolute, his face showing no emotion as he faced down the remnants of the monster, a true warrior. 80 years later, the immortal asked a simple question that bridged the vast expanse of time if the old man remembered him. The old man's eyes widened in recognition, a faint memory stirring from the depths of his long-lived past, filled with disbelief. Ulrich's gaze was steady, reflecting the countless years he had witnessed, yet holding a clear memory of that distant, harrowing night. He recounted the harrowing scene, remembering a boy scrambling through the forest, a wounded sister clutched to his back, fleeing for their lives. The old man's voice trembled with emotion as he confirmed the memory, acknowledging the profound debt they owed him. He then gestured towards a young boy and Roberta, confirming his sister had lived a healthy life thanks to a priest's healing. Ulrich's face held a quiet understanding as the old man revealed he was the last remaining survivor of those directly impacted by the monster's attack. The old man bowed deeply, a gesture steeped in generations of respect, his gratitude an unspoken weight in the air. A flashback showed a thriving village, rebuilt and prosperous, a testament to the community's resilience and Ulrich's subtle guidance. He mentioned their attempts to send tributes, hoping to convey the depth of their gratitude through humble offerings. Ulrich simply acknowledged the gesture, his minimal response hinting at his profound disinterest in such worldly displays. A cart, laden with fresh cabbages, pumpkins, and other produce, symbolized the villagers' earnest, yet rejected, attempts at gratitude. Roberta listened intently, her expression one of understanding as the old man explained how Ulrich always returned their gifts. The old man turned away, his quiet reflection on the past revealing the enduring impact of Ulrich's actions. Ulrich's unchanging face reinforced the wonder of his immortality, a stark contrast to the passage of time etched on the old man. Tears streamed down the old man's face, his overwhelming gratitude finally breaking through, a lifetime of thanks in a single moment. He reached out, his trembling, aged hand clasping Ulrich's firm, youthful one, a silent vow of eternal gratitude. Though the villagers wished for him to stay longer, his schedule was always tight, a life of constant motion dictating his departure. However, a new problem emerged. The priests from Gurten had not arrived, leaving the village's spiritual and medical needs unmet. Roberta expressed concern, noting that even corrupt priests rarely delayed the infant sacrament, making the situation unusually worrying. Looking out the window, Roberta pondered what could have happened at the church, sensing something was amiss in the nearby region. Ulrich accepted supplies from the villagers, a quiet exchange of practical aid for heartfelt thanks, as he prepared to continue his journey. As he rode away, villagers gathered, waving goodbye, their faces filled with appreciation for his unexpected assistance. The old man called out, declaring that every person in the thriving village was living proof of the children Ulrich had saved, a lasting legacy. He knelt, his voice filled with reverence, promising to teach future generations about Ulrich, ensuring his grace would never be forgotten. Odoric, however, gently but firmly refused such an honor, his profile showing his discomfort with being elevated to a deity. The old man listened, absorbing Ulrich's philosophy that true strength came from within, not from being bound by past gratitude. Ulrich insisted that they take pride in their own efforts, for someday they would be the ones reaching out to help others. The old man's eyes widened in understanding, a profound realization dawning on him about Ulrich's deeper meaning. He closed his eyes, internalizing Ulrich's wisdom, the words settling deep within his heart as a new guiding principle. Villagers waved goodbye one last time, a touching farewell marking the end of Ulrich's unexpected yet impactful visit. As Ulrich and Roberta rode away, she observed that he had wanted to stop by the village, despite his usual detachment. He admitted she was right, a rare admission that revealed his underlying curiosity and care for the people he had saved. Ulrich smiled, genuinely relieved that the villagers were doing much better than he had hoped, their prosperity bringing him true comfort. He then shifted the conversation, asking Roberta if she remembered the ruins they had seen on the ice peninsula, teasing a new mystery. Roberta looked at him, her attention piqued, confirming she was thinking of the ancient tower built by a pre-human civilization. Ulrich then revealed the ominous inscription they found, "We are now dying," a chilling message from a long-lost era. A close-up of the ancient, weathered inscription on stone emphasized the weight and history of the message. Roberta, intrigued, pressed him for more details, eager to uncover the full meaning of the ancient text. Ulrich, his expression thoughtful, explained that there was more to the inscription, a deeper layer of meaning. He gazed into the sunset, reflecting on the full message. Even if we die, we are never defeated. A powerful statement of enduring spirit. Roberta looked at him, pondering the vastness of his experience, wondering if there was any land he hadn't set foot on after living for such a long life. She realized that for an immortal like him, every path they took would truly be a journey through his countless memories. The landscape stretched out before them, a visual representation of the endless roads Ulrich had traveled and the memories they held. They arrived at Tenov City, a bustling market town, signaling the next practical step in their journey. Ulrich stated their immediate plan, to head into Tenov City, a necessary stop for their ongoing travels.